All right. All right, everybody, it's 6:30, so we will convene this meeting of the Laramie City Council for January 19th, 2021. And I would ask you all to join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. However you choose to do so. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. City Clerk, if we could have roll call.
Humby.
Here.
Gabriel.
Here.
Harrington.
Here.
O'Doherty.
Here.
Schuster.
Here.
Felder.
Here.
Somerville.
Here.
Pierce.
Here.
Weaver.
Here.
That's 9 present and 0 absent, Mayor.
Thank you very much. Now I'd like to turn it over to the public comment period on our agenda. This is public comment on non-agenda items. We ask you to please abide by the 3-minute time. City Clerk, do we have anyone?
Mayor, I have no requests ahead of the meeting. If there's anyone on the meeting that would like to make comment, Mr. Mayor, they can raise their hand under reactions.
All right, let's give folks just a moment to do that, or to use *9 if they're here by phone only, to indicate if they'd like to share public comment for this item. Not seeing any, we will move on to item number 5, consideration of changes in the agenda and setting the agenda. Vice Mayor Pierce.
Okay, thank you. I move that we approve the agenda as submitted.
Second.
Very good. Then we would just do a voice vote by aye for approval of the agenda as submitted. Now,
Aye.
City Clerk?
Aye.
Mr. Mayor, just for confirmation for the minutes, was the second by Councilor Schuster?
I believe so. Councilor Schuster, is that correct?
I would take credit for it, but it was not me.
Who was the second by?
I chimed in, but
Sounds like, it looks like maybe it was Brian Harrington.
Yeah, it could have been either of us, Mr. Mayor.
All right, let's go with Councilor Gabriel.
oh yes.
You got it. You got it in there, Councilor Gabriel. All right. Thank you, everybody. And sorry about that, City Clerk. I'll try to be mindful of stating a second. It's been moved and seconded. And now let's go ahead and go to the voice vote. We'll have to start that again. Vice Mayor, why don't you kick us off, and then I know we have to kind of chime in one at a time on this. If you're not unmuted, watch that and unmute yourself, and we'll go through this quickly.
Aye.
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 Aye. All right, that motion carries. The agenda is set, and there were no other changes to the agenda. So let's do a roll call for the agenda as submitted.
Mr. Mayor, I believe you just took a voice vote on the motion to approve the agenda as submitted.
So no further votes are required then, since there were no changes.
Correct.
Thank you, City Clerk.
You're welcome.
All right, I will now move on to item number 6. I do not believe we have any proclamations or presentations this evening. No public hearing scheduled. Do we have staff announcement?
Mayor, there are no announcements this evening.
All right. City Manager, do we have a monthly staff recognition?
Mayor, we do. Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Okay, very good. Thank you. It is my honor this evening to talk to you a little bit about our rock star, or our employee of the month, as we like to refer to them, as our rock star from December of 2020. This month it was Cynthia Daiwan, and she was nominated out of the recreation section by both her immediate and her second or once removed supervisor. The reason that Cynthia was nominated is because, as in her position as adult recreation coordinator, she's really just flawlessly transitioned her duties from in-person, in-studio services to the community to an online format in a just seamless way. So she was nominated to be the Employee of the Month largely for her really amazing response to COVID. I'll give you a little bit of background about Cynthia. In 2018, she came to work with the city. She's been in her current position for a couple of years now. She's originally from Indiana, and she did ultimately start school in Chicago, but moved to the University of Wyoming a number of years ago and completed her bachelor's degree in kinesiology, and she also has a master's in public administration. The thing that you know about Cynthia, if you know very much about her, is she is an avid sportswoman and outdoors person. She's into kind of every kind of skiing, cross-country, skate, and downhill. She actually, for a while, had a company that provided tours and instruction on those kinds of activities, and she's into every kind of biking as well. She does, most recently, acquired a fat tire bicycle, and she's hitting the mountains, roads, gravel trails, and cyclocross as well. A couple interesting things I learned about Cynthia this month is she has completed in the last few years the Tour Divide, which is a 2,745-mile ultra endurance bike packing tour, and then also completed the Wind River Mountain Range Drift, which is a 100 ultra marathon. So that's pretty cool. The thing that you know about Cynthia too, and I actually know her a little bit from many years ago when she coached my kids in mountain biking, and she was a fantastic coach and mentor. She was named actually this year the Coach of the Year for the Mountain Bike Association, so that's really cool. So those are things she does in her personal life. She does amazing things here at the city and brings a lot of passion both to what she does personally and professionally, and we're so pleased to have her as part of our organization. I understood she was going to try to jump in tonight, but before I see if she's here and give her a chance to visit with you, I know Todd Feeser wanted to say a few things.
Absolutely. Thanks. I mean, you know, if I could say anything, if you've had any chance to spend any time with Cynthia, she's got a contagious smile and a contagious bubbly personality. And it's apparent in the way that she handles her recreational programs. You know, they all see growth and they all run without problems, and she does a fantastic job with all those. But she seems to tackle every day and everything in stride with just a great smile and a great outlook, and it's just really a pleasure to get to work with her every day. I wish I got to work with her every day. I don't see her as often as I'd like, but she's a fantastic person to have on board with us. She's an excellent leader, and I look forward to what she can do in the future. And with that being said, I'll turn it over to Cynthia.
please.
Hey,
Cynthia.
hello, Honorable Mayor and Council. Thank you, Janine and Todd, for such kind words. It's been fantastic to be on board with the rec center and having the opportunity to work with such an amazing group of people.
That's great. Thanks for joining us tonight and coming in and saying hi. One thing that's really nice about this feature on our agenda is it gives us a chance to meet city employees that we haven't met before and interact a little bit with folks that we don't always get to. And so we're pleased to have you here tonight and hear a little bit about what you do for the city of Laramie. And we definitely appreciate that. And we're glad that you're able to be recognized this way by the council and the city management staff. And thank you very much. Thank you very much. And we really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. Great. Thanks a lot. I see Janine giving the clap hands. And we'll see you again soon, Cynthia. Keep up the good work and thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
You bet. Okay. Thank you, City Manager Jordan, for letting us know a little bit more about our city staff. Number 7, disclosures by city council members. Are there any disclosures from any members of the city council on any items on our agenda this evening? Not seeing any. So we'll move on to the approval of the consent agenda.
Thank you, Mayor Weaver. I move that the consent agenda be approved and that each specific action on the consent agenda be approved as indicated.
Second.
Seconded by Councilor Schuster, for the record. And let's do a roll call vote on that.
Cumby,
Yes.
Gabriel,
Yes.
Harrington. That was a thumbs up. O'Doherty,
Yes.
Schuster,
Yes.
Stalder. Yes. Somerville,
Yes.
Pierce,
Yes.
Weaver.
Yes.
That's 9 yeses and 0 no's, Your Honor.
And that motion carries. Thank you, everybody. Consent agenda is approved. We will now move into the regular agenda. And the first item on the regular agenda is item number 11, bid award for the pressure reducing valve replacement project. I'll turn it over to whoever indicates that they signed up for it. Yes, Councilor Harrington, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move to approve the bid for the pressure reducing valve replacement project to Mechanical Systems Incorporated, Cheyenne, Wyoming, in the amount of $276,113, along with a contingency of $24,806.80 for a total amount not to exceed $300,919.80, and authorize the mayor and clerk to sign.
Second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded by Councilor Somerville. Who is here to talk to us about this item?
Honorable Mayor, this is Brooks Webb.
Hello, Mr. Webb.
Hi. Honorable Mayor, City Council, this pressure reducing valve, or PRV as we call it, is behind the Motel 6 on the south side of Laramie. It's located as a zone break between Zone 1 and Zone 2. Is what it does is if the water pressure gets too low in Zone 1, this PRV allows more water into the zone to maintain pressure for residents and for fire flow. The current PRV is in a vault below ground. The vault is always full of water due to high groundwater in the area. As you can imagine, this causes maintenance issues and drastically reduces the life of the system. The new PRV is designed above ground and will be in a small shelter. The new PRV will be equipped with our SCADA communication system that allows our staff to monitor and control the PRV remotely. After design was complete, Staff solicited bids for the construction of the PRV in accordance with the City of Laramie purchasing policy and state statute. Bids were received from 4 companies on December 5th, 2020, and read aloud by the city clerk. The low bid submitted was from Mechanical Systems Incorporated. Staff and the design consultant, WWC Engineering, has reviewed the bid documents for completeness, and we are recommending the bid award and contract signing for the low bidder, Mechanical Systems Incorporated.
Thank you, Mr. Webb. Discussion on this item? Questions? Councilor O'Doherty?
There's quite a range of bid amounts. Is that typical? Thank you.
Councilor O'Doherty, through you, Mayor. I don't know that it's typical. The first 2 bids there are from Mechanical System, and 6 Points are pretty close. Those are 2 companies that we work with very often and are very familiar with our system. So I think those bids are probably more in line because of that.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Any further questions from council members on this? Mr. Webb, since you brought it up, I'll ask a follow-up question. You talked about the short lifespan of these pieces of equipment. What do we generally get out of a pressure valve over there in terms of time?
Honorable Mayor, the valves actually usually last a good 20 years, and I think this one, my understanding, has been in place for 17, 18 years. But it's degrading very quick because of the water in the vault. The valves are systems that can normally be repaired. Internal springs and mechanisms can be changed out. But over time they just simply fall apart.
Just wear out. Well, thank you for that. Is there anyone from the public that would like to make a comment on this item? Not seeing any indication from the city clerk that we have anybody that wants to speak on this.
See none, Mayor.
Thank you. Move it back one last time for the council. All right. Seeing no further questions or comments on this, let's now move to the roll call vote.
Cumby.
Yes.
Gabriel.
Yes.
Harrington.
Yes.
O'Doherty.
Yes.
Schuster.
Yes.
Stelter.
Yes.
Somerville.
Yes.
Pierce.
Yes.
Weaver.
Yes.
That's 9 yeses and 0 noes, Your Honor.
And that motion carries. Thank you very much. We'll move to item number 12, amendment to the professional services agreement.
That would be me, Councilor Schuster. The title is Amendment to the Professional Service Agreement for the Construction Services for the Pressure Reducing Valve Replacement Project. I move to approve Amendment Number 1 to the Pressure Reducing Valve Replacement Project Professional Services Agreement with WWC Engineering to provide construction management service for a total amount of $21,550 and approve the necessary budget adjustments and authorize the mayor and city clerk to sign.
Second.
All right, that's been moved and seconded by Councilor Harrington. Mr. Webb?
Honorable Mayor, City Council, this is for the construction services on the project that you just awarded for WWC Engineering, who was the design consultant and obviously is very familiar with the project. So with that, I'll take any questions if you have it.
All right, open it up for questions on this. I think we might have cleared a lot of those questions up on the previous item. Not seeing anybody. We can now move to public comment if we have public comment. Not seeing any.
I've reached
One
none
more
ahead of
time for
Mr.
the
Mayor.
council members. Okay, thank you, City Clerk. One more time for the council members for any follow-up questions or comment. Not seeing any. Let's now move to the roll call vote.
Harrington,
Yes.
Schuster,
Yes.
O'Doherty,
Yes.
Cumby,
Yes.
Gabriel, absent, Stalder,
Yes.
Somerville,
Yes.
Pierce,
Yes.
Mr. Mayor, should I request a vote from Gabriel? Gabriel,
Yes.
Yes,
Weaver.
and yes.
That's 9 yeses and 0 noes, Your Honor.
Thank you. And with that vote, that motion carries. The vote was still open, and Councilor Gabriel made it back. And that was perfectly fine, City Clerk. Let's move to the next item, item number 13.
Wi-Fi.
Thank you, Mayor. This is Councilor Pierce. I move to award the professional service agreement for the design of the Wyoming Avenue and West Laramie Stormwater Outfall Project to Wood Environment and Infrastructure Solution Incorporated of Laramie, Wyoming, and the total amount of $244,943 plus a contingency of $24,495 for a total amount not to exceed $269,438, and authorize the mayor and clerk to sign.
Second.
Moved and seconded by Councilmember Somerville. Turn it over to our staff for background.
Thank you, Honorable Mayor and members of council. Public Works is excited to bring forward the next item. It's the professional services agreement for Wyoming Avenue, West Laramie Stormwater Outfall Project. This project, it will include or be a continuation of the Linford Drainage Project that happened a couple years ago. The goal of this project is to establish an outfall, a stormwater outfall for the area, including a connection all the way to Adams Street. The roadway, there will be roadway improvements on Wyoming Avenue. This section of roadway to be improved will be between Johnson Street and Pierce Street, as well as the block of section, or the last section of Colorado Avenue between Jefferson Street and Wyoming Avenue. Per City of Laramie purchasing policy, we solicited our proposals through RFQ, had 6 firms interested in this project, and the review committee selected Wood Environment and Infrastructure Solutions to complete the design. With that, I'm willing to take any of your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Winkler. Do we have any questions on this project? Councilor Harrington, and then Councilor Stalder. Councilor Harrington.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Winkler, will this project, if I understand correctly, this project will really be sort of the centerpiece of all of the stormwater drainage in that portion of West Laramie. Is that correct?
Yes, this stormwater outfall line should It's going to be designed to handle the section of West Laramie in this area to the north of our current Monroe line. So it's key to establish for future paving projects and future tie-ins.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
You bet. Councilor Stalder?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was trying to look through my email and find the exact street. I know previously this year, and Councilor Harrington, maybe you can help me out. And when I say this year, it was when there were ward meetings, so that was like 50 years ago. We had some constituents, and I was just trying to look up the street. So can you explain how this stormwater design will help with those like corner gutter swimming pools?
So in the immediate future, the stormwater, we do look to do some local area inlets, but the stormwater outfall, we still need to kind of finalize the design. The goal is to pave Wyoming and get that all established. So kind of combining these two projects. The outfall may not travel down Wyoming Avenue directly, but it will connect over to there, allow that water to flow into the outfall line, and then have area inlets stationed where it can. It by no means will solve all of the pools in West Laramie that are there, but where we can, we're going to try and address them as we install.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any follow-up with that or further questions? Mr. Winkler? Any comments from the public on this item? Not seeing any indication that we have any, but I note that the city clerk is, all right, we don't have any. Last time for questions or comments back to the council. I'll make a brief comment before we go to the vote, which is just that I think if you look at the last 10 years for some of the drainage problems that West Laramie lives with and our community seeks to improve, you do see a trend of steady and gradual infrastructure improvement over there. And this is another example of that. Compared to where it was at 10 years ago, there has been a substantial amount of improvement towards drainage and some of the other streets issues that we see over there. And it's encouraging to see projects continue to move forward that address that and that also prepare us for further improvements to be integrated down the road. It's good news. It's a good project to see. And we're happy to vote on it tonight. City Clerk, can we get a roll call?
Somerville,
Yes.
Stalder,
Yes.
Schuster, O'Doherty,
Yes.
Harrington,
Yes.
Gabriel,
Yes.
Cumby.
Yes.
And just to confirm, Schuster, was that a yes?
I'm sorry, I didn't have my mic on. That was a yes.
Okay, thank you. Pierce,
Yes.
Weaver.
Yes.
That's 9 yeses and 0 noes, Your Honor.
And that motion carries. Thank you very much. Now go to item number 14, Councilor O'Doherty.
I move to approve the letter of opposition to Senate File 0016 because of the harmful effects the legislation could have on Laramie's economic development, environmental stewardship, and cost to city services.
Second.
Moved and seconded by Councilor Harrington. Councilor O'Doherty, would you like to speak further on this?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think that this is still relevant regardless of what happened today. All they did was, well, they did a lot of things. It was amended, but Still, there's rumblings to reduce or eliminate net metering, and it's in conflict with a lot of our goals. Thank you.
Appreciate that. Any further comment from council or questions about this? Yeah, Councilor Harrington.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. What is the time frame on this? As far as when does this authorization to speak as a city, when does it sort of sunset, if you will? Does it apply through committee hearings and onto the floor in the Senate and then similar path through the House, or is this a position statement into the future?
Councilor Harrington, I'm not sure there is a set policy for that. I know that the council unanimously supported the goals that are referenced in this letter and have incorporated those into goals from the previous year, and we'll be considering a favorable incorporation of that goal into this year's business as well, based on the feedback that we received at our goal setting meeting. My guess is, in the absence of any type of formalized policy around the time period or sunset for a letter like this in opposition to that bill, it continues until that bill's either passed or fails through the legislative process. But I'm open to any other interpretations of that or impressions from council members.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. If I could, I ask not because I don't support the intention of this. I ask because I see that the chair of the Environmental Advisory Committee is on the call, and I want to be sure that it is clear what the intention of council is for this, so that they don't feel as if they need to continually ask on this bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Harrington. I think that's prudent, and I haven't seen anybody indicating. Councilor Gabriel, please.
Mr. Mayor, I was just wondering if maybe you could once again talk about what happened today, since we talked about it in pre-council among council members, maybe for the public to be brought up to speed on what exactly happened over in the state legislature today, I think would be helpful.
I think you're absolutely right about that, Councilor Gabriel. And if there isn't any objection, I'm going to ask for the council to allow our EAC chair, Ellen Carano, to speak to those questions specifically. So without objection, I would like to recognize Ellen to speak to that. Welcome.
Thank you, Mayor Weaver. So the Senate Corporations Committee met today to discuss the proposed amendments to net metering, and so there was a kind of a strict time limit involved. They did make it through all the public testimony, and thank you, Mayor Weaver, for testifying. And I think you brought a really important voice of how the proposed legislation would affect local governments. And so thank you for that. And so what ended up happening was Senator Scott proposed an amendment to this bill. So the initial bill had said net metering is repealed and the Public Services Commission is now responsible for figuring out a rate system that will not subsidize net metering customers at the expense of other utility customers. And so Senator Scott proposed to get rid of that initial just flat out repeal of net metering. And so that is now gone. The remaining bill, and I have a rough text for it, so I can quickly read it. So the Public Service Commission shall conduct public hearings and establish an appropriate system to regulate the rates, terms, and conditions of customer generators by all electric utilities for electricity produced from net metering systems first operational on or after July 1st, 2022. The system shall prevent subsidization of customer generators compared to all other customers of the electric utility. The Commission shall establish the system under this subsection by April 1st, 2022. So net metering temporarily would still exist under this bill And then that deadline for the Public Services Commission to determine what's going to happen in the future is put off until July 1st, 2022.
I appreciate that summary. I know we all appreciate that summary. And Council, for your edification, the substance of my comments touched on the concern that we had over the legislation's potential impact to our attempt to generate some savings from our renewable energy projects that have been widely supported by our constituents and this council, and that we were concerned about the impact and potential impact that this legislation might have on those efforts, and how that extends both our concerns as a city government and also our utility ratepayers, because any dollar that we can stretch is going to have a ripple effect out. And that was largely the substance of my comments to the committee. Does anyone else have any questions or follow-up on this before we turn it over for public comment? Councilor Gabriel.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. And Ellen, just for clarification, this has a long ways to go since this was just a committee vote, and it has to go to the entire Senate and then the House. And so I would say maybe from your perspective, this has a ways to go yet.
Mr. Mayor, through you. Thank you, Councilman Gabriel, for that comment. This is a good thing to bring up. So this passed the Senate Corporations Committee. Now on January 27th, it will be presented before the full Senate. And then should it make it through the Senate, then yes, it does have to go on through the House as well. So yeah, we're looking at a long process here.
Thank you.
So, Councilor Gabriel, I think that was a good question, and that speaks to I think Councilor Harrington's question about, again, do we have a concern about any duration for this letter? I don't see that. I'm not hearing that. I think we're, unless I hear otherwise, what I believe the sense of the council is that the intention of this letter to oppose this, for reasons that have already been stated, tracks with this bill until it's ultimately decided by the legislature. And without seeing any objection to that, I think that's generally going to be our operating agreement as far as that goes. We can certainly talk about that some more if anybody else has anything to add. For now, I'd like to turn it over to the public. I do think we have interested members of the public to speak on this item. Clerk?
Mr. Mayor, we have Brett Glass.
Mr. Glass, welcome.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor Weaver and members of council. I watched that hearing, and yes, indeed, what they've done is they've modified the Senate file to essentially eliminate net metering unless the Public Service Commission approves some way to continue it in some form. And the problem with this is that the Public Service Commission is subject to regulatory capture by the power companies, who really would not like to have to pay people anything for injecting electricity back into the grid. So I think it's very meritorious that you're writing this letter. There is plenty of time for legislators to act on it. This has to go to the floor of the Senate. It has to go through 3 readings there. It then has to go to the House, where it's going to go to committee and then get 3 readings there. So yes, I would strongly recommend that you oppose the discontinuation of compensation for net metering, and make it very clear that you're concerned about its sunsetting after July 1st, 2021, possibly before the Public Service Commission would even be required to act on it. So please modify the letter accordingly and send it to them. Maybe we'll get some results.
Thank you, Mr. Glass. City Clerk, do we have others on this topic?
Mr. Mayor, I've received no others prior, and I see no other hands raised.
All right, we appreciate that. Council members, any other thoughts or comments on this? Councilmember O'Doherty, please.
I wonder if I should modify the letter to say Senate File 0016 in the year 2021, so that we know it's not Senate file for a previous year or a future year. So I move to insert the words in 2021 after Senate File 0016 to the letter.
I'll second that.
And I think we might proceed on this amendment through simply a process of asking if there's any objections to it. Otherwise, we will move forward unless there's a procedural issue with that. It doesn't change the substance of this letter in any meaningful way.
Mr. Mayor, it can be approved by unanimous consent.
All right. Seeing no objections to it, we will consider that change in the wording of the letter approved by unanimous consent. Not something we do very often, nor should we. In this case, it's appropriate. I appreciate the dialogue about this and the questions back and forth from everybody, and the update and the summary given by our EAC Chair Carano. Thank you very much for joining us and for your time spent on this issue and at that legislative committee, and members of our community for remaining engaged on it. This time, I believe we can move to the next item on the agenda. Item number 15, original ordinance number 2021. I actually don't see a dash on that, so.
Mr. Mayor, point of order, we need to vote on that.
Oh, I'm so sorry. The change was unanimous consent, not the letter approval itself. Can we get a roll call vote on that item, Clerk?
Cumby,
Yes.
Gabriel,
Yes.
Harrington,
Yes.
O'Doherty,
Yes.
Schuster,
Yes.
Stalder,
Yes.
Somerville,
Yes.
Pierce,
Yes.
Weaver.
Yes.
That's 9 yeses and 0 noes, Your Honor.
Thank you very much, and that motion carries. Now I'd ask us to proceed to the next item on the agenda, item number 15.
Mr. Mayor, I would move to approve original ordinance number 2021 as recommended by the Planning Commission on first reading in accordance with findings of fact and conclusions of law.
I'll second.
Motion and a second by Vice Mayor Pierce. We will turn it over to our staff.
Honorable Mayor, Council, thank you so much. As the title says, I am here to talk to you all about our parking standards as a whole for the city. The reason we are bringing to you these amendments is based off of a number of reasons. National trends that we've seen as planning staff, correct concerns and confusions within the language, awkward numbers, kind of just out of date, complicated language, but as well as just showing kind of what parking has become in our city. And before I dive into the reasons as a whole, I just want to give a quick summary of how our code works. And under attachment A of the ordinance, you'll see a very large table of which is just, it lists out about every use, whether that's a dwelling unit, residential, or all the way to like a waste and salvage yard. And with those uses is attached either a number for a unit that is there, or GFA, which is gross floor area. And that's how we dictate how much parking is required per development. That is the bulk of this ordinance. The kind of text sections 1 through 20, excluding 13, deal with correcting language as well as defining a basically a professional engineering study for some variation in those numbers. But the main reason we are bringing these forward is a big reason is because of land use and sustainable land use, and ensuring that we offer one, developers a not as expensive way to develop, because one, parking is very expensive to produce, generally $5,000 to $10,000 depending on the land value that you are developing upon, but also that cost goes on to the tenant or the resident living in that area. The other is also getting our code ready for future kind of technology and practices that we're seeing in the nation. One, autonomous vehicles, while that sounds really far off, models, technology, what we're seeing in the field is that it's really not that far. And if we've seen anything, that development is, nothing happens overnight. And growth is, sometimes not as fast as we would like. And so preparing our code for what could be a very different street future for Laramie as well as anywhere in the world. But the other is, we do hope to have public transit in Laramie at some point. We all know that has to occur with a certain population and ridership and all that to actually make that public transit a value to us to spend money on. But we do hope to see it. And with that, we don't see as many cars on the road. And so, sorry, digging back in. The main way we kind of come up with these numbers is an overall manual called the ITE trip manual. And it's essentially this table that we have in our code now, but for just case studies and like averaging case studies basically across the US. And that's how they come up with like what is an average number. A lot of our code already meets this, but we are still recommending a 30 to 50% decrease based off of talking to developers, seeing the hindrance on certain housing projects, and just seeing a lack of use of the parking lots that we have now and the size that they are. We had an intern do a quick analysis of the parking lots within the city, as well as calculating the on-street parking, and we're really not using, I can't give you the exact number now. I should have that for second reading. But we aren't using anywhere close to a majority of that parking. As you know, parking is pretty contentious within our city. I think we've all got comments on this project or other projects in the past. But as of yet, we have only received one public comment, and it was concerns around just reducing a parking and more concerns about a parking crisis in the downtown district, of which that will be a conversation for when we bring the DC text amendments forward next meeting. But as well as just where Wyoming is as an auto culture and an auto-centric culture, and how many people or how many cars people have, how large our cars are. We rely on driving to places, but one thing I would like to state is that we do have a relatively dense community. And as a land use practice, giving more and more of that land to parking keeps spreading us out. And that, one, takes away from possible businesses to go where that parking is to increase more tenant space, increase space for another business to go, or another residential unit, or anything that produces, an economic driver. That parking lot is or parking spaces are very invaluable to us as a government, but as well as an unused parking space is just a blank negative space. And so to keep this very walkable culture when it's not -30 out, preparing for a dense land use as well as a place that fully uses the land that we have is as a staff, we feel is very important. With this, we did present our findings to cdlc, which is a volunteer group in Laramie that brings proposed text amendments to us, but also reviews any text amendments that we are proposing to you. And they did provide a letter of support, but as well as community builders, which many of you worked with them on a housing code audit that we will hopefully be bringing forward early in this year. But they also provided a support letter just stating the kind of how parking can decrease kind of value within a property and doesn't allow it to have a variety of uses after parking because of the amount of cost that it takes to remove that parking once it's there, as well as sustainable land use and kind of the themes that I've been going on. I will leave it there, and I am here to answer any questions or concerns that you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Cox. Go to the council for follow-up questions on this. All right, let's go with Councilor Harrington, followed by Councilor O'Doherty. Councilor Harrington, you're up.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You know, I think largely, Matthew, I would agree with a lot of this. I'm having a hard time with sort of the sweeping nature of it all. And I say that specifically because I think there is portions of our town that do have a parking issue. And I'm not sure how we are addressing that. And certainly, like, I think if you'd like a finer point on it, the area surrounding the university would be applicable to all of this, I assume. And I think there's no two ways about it. The area surrounding the university does have some variety of need for more parking. So I'm curious if you have any thoughts on that or how this runs into that idea with that certain dynamic in our community.
Yeah, Honorable Mayor, Council. Yeah, it is no secret that the residents around the university do have a trouble with students parking in their neighborhood. This is a common challenge that we see in university cities all over the place. And my answer to that is that most of the neighborhoods around the university are single family. And there is a portion of code that was brought to light earlier from a call from Councilor O'Doherty. It's section section 5 of the ordinance that states 110% of the minimum requirements established. It states that we are removing categorized as a commercial or industrial use in chapter 1510 of this code. And as a staff, we realize that this needs to be corrected to state something similar around any use that requires a site plan. And single family residential units do not require a site plan. And in this way, they can still provide as much off-street parking as they can fit on their lot or as anyone wants to do in their single family unit. But around the university, the challenge is that this land is already developed. There's very little infill spaces to put, we hope, like duplexes or triplexes or something, and anything with 4 units and above must provide this parking, at least one per unit. But, you know, as far as the area around the university, there's I think the challenge goes farther than a parking requirement. And whether that's like increased permitting or the university switching where some parking is and moving it to other spaces, as they did have a parking study a couple of years ago that showed they have an exorbitant amount of parking that just isn't used. But yeah.
All right, let's go to Councilor O'Doherty and then Vice Mayor Pierce.
I have a lot of issues with this, so I guess I'll just start with that section that Matt just brought up. I don't see why we would limit, or in section 5. So the table has us reducing parking by about 40% in a lot of these zones, which I don't think it's appropriate for hospital or for the university, reducing the parking requirement. But then to say that someone can only put 110% of that minimum. So for a 3,000 square foot building, as it is now, you might need 10 spaces. The table would have that go down to 6 spaces. And if you wanted to go up to 110%, that's only 6.6 spaces. So it's reducing it a lot and then not letting people go over the minimum if they foresee some need for more parking down the road. And I really can't understand why it costs $192,000 to change a parking lot to something else. I looked at that study and I can't figure out those numbers. So maybe you can inform me. It seems to me parking lots can be changed into buildings pretty readily because now the site has already been compacted. So I take issue with that statistic. So I guess that's my first objection is to section 5. I don't want to reduce the percentage above the minimum to 110% from the current 125% because we don't know which way a site is going in the future. It could, if it changes use. Thank you.
Mr. Cox, would you like to address some of that?
Honorable Mayor, Council, sure, I'll address it as much as I can. And one thing I do want to shed light on from our current code is that we do have uses that are parking lots. You know, you can still have a parking lot as a use, and that is the, you know, build a parking lot to our current landscaping design standards and have a whole lot as parking or a parking garage. The other thing is we also have storage lots and that, you know, people can store trailers or store other cars and everything. So it takes on that desire for people to have those vehicles and all that. What we don't want is, you know, a number of places, whether places along 3rd Street, places along Grand, or any of our arterial or collector streets being used as personal storage, where it's just a major commercial corridor that could be very valuable land and allow for a business or a company to be there. But instead, what our public, what our visitors are seeing is just places that are stored with stuff when it's just private things that you know, no value is coming from it, or at least no tax value. It might be under the table, I'm unsure. But the other thing is it does create an aesthetic along our commercial zone streets that is not what we believe those lots and those properties are best used for, and would rather see businesses fronting those. But yeah, as far as the 110%, you know, it was an overall reduction in parking, and as staff, we wouldn't be too worried about keeping it at 125%. But what we don't want is a commercial property such as Walmart's area where it's just, you know, they had extra space, so they built a parking lot, and that cost will go on to the next owner at some point to develop that land. But yeah.
Okay, Vice Mayor Pierce, and Vice Mayor Pierce, before I turn it over to you, since we are in this format, I just want folks to know that it's acknowledged that there are people waiting for public comment. I just want them to know that they are in the queue and they will be recognized at the appropriate time. Vice Mayor Pierce.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Matt, this question is for you and it's on the table on page 2. It's called or titled Educational Facilities. And it lists types of, college or university, student centers, school resource center, school K-12, and then a vocational or technical trade. And then under college and university, it basically breaks it down into 4 parking spots per classroom or 1 per 500 square foot of administrative office space. And what I'm wondering about is dorms. And is that covered someplace else, or are we intentionally omitting parking requirements for the dorms? I mean, is it someplace else in here? Or is it just an oversight? Or maybe a different ordinance or something else?
Mr. Cox?
Appreciate it, honorable mayor and council. Derek, hop on if I am incorrect, but I believe dorms would fall under a multifamily use, which would be found on page 1 under dwelling multifamily because it is a residential use essentially. But yeah.
Mr. Cheney, if you have something to add.
Mayor and council, yeah, Matthew's correct on that. The one thing I would point out is when it's come to those facilities, traditionally parking hasn't been provided by the university like many of their other facilities, as they're components of the educational based development of the university. And so we have also, though, not had a dorm built in a very, very long time. And so we haven't really ever crossed that bridge as to what the interpretation of the university would be and what our interpretation of requiring parking for that. Because right now with other university buildings, if they're core education, they are not required to provide parking.
Thank you.
So if I could keep going with that. So I'm not exactly sure if I heard you correctly, but as it stands, we don't have any recommendations or code associated with dorms. Am I correct in that?
Honorable Mayor and Council, I think what Derek was saying is that under our code, we would interpret dorms as dwelling in multifamily, but it's yet to be assumed as to how the university would interpret that use, whether they would make the argument that a dorm is an educational facility. And so I think for us, it may be worth looking into adding college or university dorms under educational facilities and just putting the same code as multifamily to possibly cover us for the future. But I think that might be something Derek could add on if that he's amenable to that.
Okay, can I keep going? There is a section on page 1 that talks about group living, and it gives a fraternity and sorority opportunities. So that might be another section to add it, but I guess I'll just say I will look forward to the addition wherever you deem it appropriate. How's that sound?
I think Derek.
Mayor and council, for what we can do is for second reading, we'll propose an option for dorms. I mean, there's no harm in adding dormitories in as a specific use. If you want to be more specific always within the table, we can always do that. And so that's not a complicated thing, and we could have something prepared for second reading, no problem.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. Councilmember Schuster, you've been waiting patiently.
Thank you. I'm just like the rest of the other group. It's just things kind of shocked me a little bit. A duplex, which is dwelling two family, is one per duplex. I've never seen only one car at a duplex. Some of the others, and they said it, they already said it, fraternity or sorority, 3 for every 5 occupants. I've never seen a frat or sorority only have 3 out of the 5 only have cars. I thought it was kind of funny. There's even a spot for cemeteries. Community building would probably have been our, community center, I think, would have been our rec center, so 1 per 350 square foot. Churches, 1 per 100 square foot if they have a sanctuary. That one scared me a little bit. I just looked at all the categories and it really, some of them were correct. And I read the first page just talking about the dealing with everything. They're talking about, since we're going to have all these autonomous driving vehicles, that you no longer need a parking place. And I realize, yes, they are coming, but they're not here yet. And I'm scared to make this rule too soon in our lives. I really feel that this is too soon, and I just don't see it being quite correct yet. Maybe in 10 years, maybe they'll have the autonomous vehicle more thing. Because it talked about, well, it's just going to drop you off for supper downtown, and it's going to go drive around or go home and wait for you to call it to come back. And I thought, this would be great, but this isn't here yet. This isn't set up yet. So, thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Schuster. Councilmember Somerville, I see you, but I also see Mr. Cox. I think you may want to provide some feedback on Councilmember Schuster's question. So with your permission, go ahead, Mr. Cox.
Sorry, Honorable Mayor, Council, real quick. I just want to clarify one thing under duplex dwelling 2 family. It is 1 per dwelling unit, so that would be 2 for a duplex. But generally, the whole theme of the residential areas is 1 per unit is kind of how you can look at it. Thank you.
All right. Councilor Somerville.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Matthew, I just had 2 questions kind of that I see as important to the discussion long term. Could you go over for me again real quick the return on investment in terms of basically steering us away from requiring these parkings and allowing and encouraging other uses to be developed there? And the second question is, have there been any discussions regarding additional funding or supports that might be needed for public transport or alternative modes of transportation like bike lanes, just other pieces of the transportation infrastructure that might need investment before we have fully autonomous vehicles? If you could let me know if there's any thought on that, I'd appreciate it.
Yeah. Honorable Mayor, Council, thank you. No, great questions. And the return on investment, I mean, I don't have, exact numbers for you, but, certain properties that came along, one that was a bit contentious early on was the Dollar General in West Laramie, of where they provided only enough space and we had to require that they added like 4 more parking spaces when if you go by there, only half of them are used. And so in that space, the idea behind it is that if a building or a business only needs a certain amount and we reduce what they need for any type of impervious surface, then, the question is, could they extend that building and add another unit in for an ice cream shop or what? I don't know, any use. And on that, whoever developed the building, they get that extra monthly return back on a tenant and on a construction, and it adds value, but as well as creates space for a type of commercial growth. The other being that a return on investment could be very large in the residential realm, where we are hoping to allow more affordable housing and housing that can be an easier price point for someone coming into the market. And when you add the construction costs of more parking, whether that is just a driveway coming into a single family house or a duplex, or adding that cost to a condo, the cost of that additional parking that, it may not be required, but what will happen is that those price points for the residential will come down based off of the overall construction costs. The other part is that a place like Walmart, they now have the ability, because, well, one, they have an excess of parking now, but similar businesses like that can now go through a lot split or a plat process and come up with a whole new lot to sell, where that can be just an independent building business, whatever someone decides to go there. And so that's the main way we're looking at a return on investment, but as well as it encourages a more urban pattern, because we do have those businesses more close together, and it does create hopefully something similar to our downtown and other areas. Obviously, our downtown is very dense, so that would be a very intense thing. But yeah, and then as far as funding for transport, I do not know about any funding for buses or any type of government-led transport, but I will tell you, we, as a city, we are investing in our trail infrastructure and bike paths, and as well as anytime a developer plats a portion of land that is adjacent to a path that's in our Parks and Rec plan or a major street or something, they have to add that infrastructure, and that contributes to the overall connectivity through things like pedestrianization or bikeability. And yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
All right. Thank you. All right. Back to the council. Councilor Stalder.
Thank you, Mayor. I wonder if it would be possible to split this up into two different categories instead of approving it all at once. I think there's a real difference between the lens when you're looking at commercial versus residential. If you're incentivizing a commercial developer, they're thinking, I need to get the perfect amount of parking spots so I can maximize my space and have an ice cream shop, to generate more revenue. And they're really interested in that. But when you're talking about a housing developer, they're going to build that multifamily unit, and I was kind of looking at the math on the multifamily. If you had a 6-unit place with 2 bedrooms and 3 bedrooms, you could easily go from 11 or 12 parking spots to 6 under this. And the developer that's building that, they don't care. They're not going to live there. They're not going to deal with the people that are complaining about parking. So I see what you're getting at in terms of return on investment. I just think it's a little bit different when we're talking about commercial versus residential, and if it would be possible to split these up for second reading. I don't know procedurally or parliamentary how you would do that, but I just feel like it's two very different approaches. I see what you're saying on both of them, and I like your progressiveness, but really different to me.
Thank you, Councilor Stalder. I'm going to speak only to the procedural question because I think it's a good one, and I think it's relevant right now. And I'm not certain procedurally if that would require an action by the council, an amendment action to split that up that we would do at a subsequent meeting, or that we would take now. I see the city clerk has made itself available. City clerk, do you have a procedural piece of advice you might share with the council with regard to Councilor Stalder's question? It seems like that might be the next move if the council wishes. I'm not certain if that's a first reading matter, but I'm interested in your advice.
Thank you, Mayor. There is a parliamentary procedure dividing the question. It would just be a matter of trying to figure out what would be under each division, I think.
Yeah, all right. I appreciate that. So that's something for us to consider. I'm going to ask if there's any other council input on this before we turn it over to members of the public, and then we'll bring it back here for some more discussion. I saw Councilor Doherty. Were you seeking recognition?
Yeah. I would like to amend the section 5 to remove the changes to that section of code. So I'm proposing my amendment is to leave section 5 as it was before the changes.
I'll second it so we can bring it on the floor.
All right. It's been seconded by Mr. Councilmember Schuster. Councilmember Schuster?
Yes, I seconded. That's all I was acknowledging. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay. Nope. Just wanted to see if you had a follow-up there. All right. Well, we've already begun to entertain divisions and amendments before I've heard from every council member or we've gone to the members of the public, but we do need to discuss the amendment. On the amendment, comments on the amendment, Councilor Doherty?
Yeah, it's that we're cutting down parking in 2 ways and not allowing people to have more parking if they see fit. So I would like to keep it at 125% of the minimum requirements.
Any other input from council members before I turn it over to the staff for feedback? All right. Mr. Cox or Mr. Cheney, who's up first on this?
Mr.
Cox, yeah.
Honorable Mayor, Council, thank you. The only thing I would just make sure the language is correct in stating that not just the 110% back to 125, but that we also possibly work in language, and we can work on this as a staff, but that also brings in that language I brought up earlier about a site plan requirement so that we aren't affecting single family homes. But that's it.
Right, thank you,
Mr. Mayor, if it went back to the original language, doesn't that take care of that issue? Because it says categorized as commercial or industrial.
It does. I apologize. Yep.
All right. Thank you, Councilmember Doherty. Thank you, Mr. Cox. Vice Mayor Pierce?
So I'm wondering if we agree with this change, is it going to change the chart at all?
Back to you, Mr. Cox.
Honorable Mayor, Council, no, it would not change the chart at all.
Thank you.
Thank
Council members on this amendment? Before I go to the public for comment on the amendment. Councilor Stalder.
Just a brief comment. I understand where you're coming from with Walmart having excessive parking, but as you talk about becoming more and more of a dense urban environment, I think things like the Walmart parking lot a lot of times is used for staging when there's forest fires and different things. Like having that space is really useful in a lot of community-oriented ways. I don't think it's necessarily a terrible thing to have extra parking.
Councilor Gabriel, I noted that you were there. Were you indicating seeking recognition, Councilor Gabriel? No? You can just nod if I'm on the right track and I can move on. All right, let's go to the city clerk to bring in public comment on this. To the amendment, with the understanding from the chair here that you might be able to do 2 comments in one, since we're still largely speaking to the overall item on the table. City Clerk, who do we have for public comment?
Brett Glass.
Mr. Glass?
Mr. Mayor, on and for the amendment, I do want to speak in general to the ordinance because I have a lot of comments on that. But anyone who believes that Walmart has too much parking has not seen it when the highway is closed. We get big piles ups of 18-wheelers who have no place else to go and otherwise might park on local streets because they can't get out of town. Giving them a place to park in that parking lot at least gives us some sales tax revenue. I think it would be a very bad idea to say that they couldn't have more parking. That's exactly the opposite of what we want.
All right, Mr. Glass. Appreciate the brevity and waiting for further comment on the item in general.
Steve Grabowski.
Mr. Grabowski, please. Thank you, City Clerk. Mr. Grabowski, please.
Yes, Honorable Mayor and Council. With what's going on, I've recently been reading Brave New World in 1984. What you're saying, Mr. Cox, you're anticipating these autonomous robotic vehicles in advance. In other words, you're pushing us to jettison our vehicles. Indicated that we don't need them when it's minus 30. Well, what about when it is blizzarding or minus 30 or something like that? I'm 69. What about 5, 10, 15 years from now when I can no longer walk? It sounds like the global agenda to eliminate the automobile that's out there, except for the elite, of course. This is Wyoming. People live here and move here for the sports, for the hunting, for the fishing, for the hiking. They need to get to the place where they're going to hike or bike, and they come here for the outdoors. What is necessary in New York City does not suit Wyoming. And the United States was set up with local governments responsible to the local people for their local needs, not what some people in Rome or New York or Los Angeles or something decide would be beneficial because that's where they live. We live here. We need rules made for us. And the university, I'm sorry to say, wants to throw all of its vehicles out on the streets to where the rest of us can't even get to our stores, have to walk 3 blocks to visit our friend. It's really bad. They don't pay any of our fees. They don't support us with taxes or anything else, but we got to give them all of our local services and so forth. That's basically what I had to say tonight. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Grabowski. City Clerk.
Nancy Sindelar.
Nancy Sindler, welcome. Go ahead.
I'm basically in favor of this. I've only had a few moments to look at it ahead of time. I wanted to bring to council's attention the study I did about 1.5 years ago that showed that the taxes per acre downtown was $19,000, 635, whereas the taxes from the big box store on the eastern edge of town was $2,134, which is about an 8-to-1 or 9-to-1 ratio. Parking doesn't bring in income to the city. The state would not let me look at sales tax. They said it was proprietary, so I had to use property taxes. But it's just, and I could do the same kind of thing looking at like Eastern Grand Avenue that shows that the farther apart businesses are, the less revenue they bring in. So having less parking, moving buildings closer, I think is a good thing. Thank you.
All right. City Clerk, do we have anyone else in the queue for public comment on this?
Mr. Mayor, I see no other raised hands.
All right. Turn it back over to the council. Any other questions or comments here? Councilor Schuster.
Thank you. I put up my little hand, but I guess you didn't see that. So,
No, I saw it. You put up the clap hand.
Oh, did I? Okay.
Yeah.
One of the things, since I've been on council this long, and I was even on when Walmart built their supercenter, their intention when they built that was to sell outlying lots to use that parking lot. So they had some issues after they built it that to level that land, their parking lot is sitting on top of pure stone. So to put a foundation in or a footing in for another building became extremely expensive. And then also it was discovered that they're over part of the aquifer. So all the outbuildings that they wanted to build so that parking lot would be full of cars doing retail business kind of got shot in the foot. But they wanted to have 10 more businesses out there. They wanted to put a fueling service center out there. So their parking lot was built to size when they built it for their future intentions. They never did get a build on it, but it was built to size for their future intentions. So I hear people talking about different things there, and I'm not in favor of the parking removal of a lot of things. Thank you.
Thank you, Council Member Schuster. Members of Council, we are on an amendment. I've allowed some range in this discussion and the public comment because I think they're so very closely related and not really meaningfully distinguished from one another with what this amendment seeks to do. And so it's been fine up until this point. Councilor Schuster, I see the hands. You just getting the hang of it there? No problem. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it at all. If it's not working for you, you need me, just raise your hand. Council, further comments on this amendment, again, with the recognition that it's very tightly linked to the overall ordinance or code change before us. Any other comments or questions for staff? All right, I'll speak briefly to the amendment. I oppose the amendment on procedural grounds only. It's been the practice of this council to reserve amendments, substantial amendments, until the second reading. I believe that's practice that should be preserved. I don't know that that's a consensus view, but it's my view, so I'll be voting no on the amendment. There is no other commentary or question on the amendment. We'll move to a roll call vote on the amendment.
Somerville,
No.
Pierce,
No.
Stalder,
Yes.
Schuster,
Yes.
O'Doherty,
Yes.
Cumby,
No.
Gabriel,
Can you repeat that for us, Councilor Gabriel, please?
No.
Thank you.
Harrington,
Yes.
I'm sorry, I think I asked for Pierce already, so Weaver.
No.
Mr. Mayor, that's 4 yeses and 5 noes.
That amendment does not pass. Back to the main item. Members of the council. Councilor Stalder.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councilor.
I won't make an amendment on this tonight in light of your historical tidbit about not making amendments on the first reading, but I have a question about section 2, about properties located within the downtown zoning district shall be exempt from minimum parking requirements. So the change there to me is setting it up for future development downtown. Is that correct?
Mr. Cox, that's for you, I believe.
Honorable Mayor, Council, Section 2 is part of the reason of just cleaning up and correcting some language. And so basically under just standard code or municipal code language, R is generally not used, and shall be does speak to the future because code is generally speaking to work to be done. And so that's the only change. It really doesn't affect me.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Appreciate that. Vice Mayor Pierce.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor Weaver. I really like what Councilor Stalder mentioned earlier about attempting to separate this based on residential as well as business. I think she might really be onto something here, but it seems to be so intertwined that I have no idea how to even get there. And I'm wondering if maybe we could make some sort of a suggestion for staff to maybe mull the idea over and see if it's even possible, or maybe if we bring back that conversation. Mr. Teeny, Mr. Cox, I don't know what you think of the idea, but I'd be curious to really further some of that discussion.
Mr. Teeny, and then any follow-up from Mr. Cox afterwards is fine. Mr. Teeny, I saw you with your hand up.
Mayor and Council, based upon what Member Stalder is mentioning, so thinking about you've got your uses that are found in the table that are housing related, which is essentially the top part of the table. And then really the remainder of the table is all commercial or other types of, industrial, other uses, non-residential. I would say that if council felt that it was easier to talk about housing related items in a discussion and all the other items in a discussion, I don't think separating the discussion would be very difficult. The reason why it's brought before you the way it is simply we're looking at the parking numbers specifically for the most part in this ordinance. And so the idea is that all of those are found in the same table. I think maybe through discussion, focusing on just housing related items, we could go through those, and then focusing the discussion on commercial might be a way to do it. If you felt that the ordinance needed to be split per what the city clerk mentioned in terms of the procedural process, I think that could be a more formal way to break them apart. But I think discussion focused on one or the other could happen. I think the reality of when you look at what you have before you is you have a reduction in parking for residential uses and a reduction in parking for commercial uses. So I think then if you want to focus in on specific uses, maybe that you are not comfortable with, I think bringing each of those up, whether it's a residential or commercial use, just might be okay as well. But I think that's going to be more if you need more discussion specifically related to one group of uses or the other. So.
Thank you, Mr. Teeny. Mr. Cox, you want to add anything to that? All right. Members of the council, staff folks, we've seen similar approaches from time to time with some items, and I'd be interested to know about feelings and feedback on when this item returns, that it be split into a section A and a section B along the lines of what Mr. Teeny described. I believe it could still be brought onto the agenda as the same item and split into a section A and B. But before I get too far out ahead of myself, I'd look for any feedback. I don't know if that's a question for the city clerk or the city attorney. Councilor Doherty, I see you seeking recognition, but I'm going to wait to see if we can get some feedback on this question.
Mayor, could you repeat what your question is exactly? Just
When
whether
this-
we can bring it back in a section A and section B?
On second reading.
That's a great question.
Or could we have a motion on this? Could we have the original motion on second reading and then a supplementary motion at that time to split it into sections A and B?
Mr. Mayor, I believe that we could do that. We could start with the main motion, and we can prepare a motion to divide the question, you know, if that's the council's will, you know, and then we can proceed from there with each portion separated out, one for residential, one for commercial, industrial.
That may be taking shape here, but I see Mr. Southard as well to weigh in. City Attorney, go ahead.
I'm able to unmute myself. Yeah, I think like Nancy said, there's a couple ways to accomplish that. It can be structured as a substitute motion. I mean, if Derek and Matthew want to structure it differently, you can bring it back on the table, bring it back in front of you in the same form on second reading, and then substitute what they bring you, which could move it into two sections, or do as Nancy suggested, a motion to divide the question, but they would have divided it for you. So there'll be no confusion about what you're doing.
Thank you for that. I'm inclined to go with, for what it's worth, council members, to go with Nancy's suggestion that we have the original motion come back and then a substitute motion listed below it that divides it, that we choose from. But I want to hear feedback from you, and I know Council Member O'Doherty wants to speak. Go ahead, Council Member.
Sorry, I have a lot to say. So it's hard to divide this, unlike the issues that we dealt with downtown before. The section number 13 refers to the table that refers to this whole document. So if we divide it, I mean, so the reason I brought my amendment was to try to do this in pieces. And I thought a piece where I'm just getting rid of the changes was not the same as an amendment that is changing wording and everything. So that's why I thought that was a safe bet. Tried to take it off in bites. So I would suggest that section 13 be its own, that would be A, and then the rest of it could be part B if we decide to divide it, the question next time. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember O'Doherty. I'd go back to staff to see if they think they might be able to set that up along the lines of the divided motion options that the city clerk mentioned. But following Councilor O'Doherty's roadmap there, if you will.
Honorable Mayor, Council, I'm going to invite Derek to come in if I'm missing something, but I think a way that we could divide this up is one, we could make attachment A or the table its own motion apart from all of the text amendments, but we could also do add a section in that states attachment A residential uses, and then attachment A, and if you see under the table the gray bars, there's public and institutional use, commercial uses, and literally just define those out in text after attachment A. But Derek, correct me if that might be a dirty or messy way to do it.
Planner Tini, what do you have to say?
Mayor and council, what I would say is I think we could break it up into two sections that would have the text items, which are essentially sections 1 through everything excluding the table. And then I think in the table, what we can do, as Matthew mentioned, is we could provide two portions to attachment A that helps you distinguish between the residential uses and then the other uses. That way, then you could focus your discussion on those different sections. Does that help?
Councilor Doherty, I'll give you a chance again on that, because I'm not sure if that addresses your concerns, and then I'm going to have to go back around because I know we have people that have been trying to seek recognition. But Councilmember O'Doherty, please.
Yes, that addresses my concerns. Thank you.
All right, Vice Mayor Pierce, were you looking for me?
I was, and my question doesn't need to be answered now, but my question is, I appreciate this conversation, this discussion. What do we need to do tonight, if anything, to get to where we want to be for second reading? Do we have to make, I mean, is this discussion enough, or do we have to make an amendment to, I mean, I'm just curious if we need to do anything procedurally to get us to our second reading.
Vice Mayor Pierce, I follow that line of questioning, and that's why I wanted to check with Mr. Southard earlier. And I believe what he advised the council is it could be brought back in a split form as a substitute motion that could be brought on either with the current motion as it is, or we're free to split it. I'll go back to him. I see. I'm not sure, Mr. Southard, if you have the little hand icon up to speak, or if it's left over from last time, but I think I'd invite you to again try to address that question before we get too deep in the weeds here and we still have public comment. Go ahead, Mr. Southard.
Yeah, yes, Mayor. I think we are deep in the weeds here. It seems to be the sense of council that staff can bring back to you some way to split these issues. You will either like what staff brings you and choose to split it that way or not. But that'll happen on second reading.
And then to get there, we would need to pass this item on first reading tonight and then see what comes forward. That's my understanding.
Yeah, yes, that would get you to second reading, or you could postpone first reading until a date certain and do this on the renewed first reading. It's really up to you, but it won't be hard to accomplish.
Thank you, Mr. Southard. I'm trying to part the weeds here as we go along. Vice Mayor Pierce, question answered?
Yes, it has been. I'm just curious from a staff perspective, if they'd like us to postpone beyond 2 weeks so they have more time to split, or are we good for a 2 week, for just another 2 weeks?
Honorable Mayor, Council, I think it's a very easy task for us to be able to do. You know, it really took no time at all for design standards, and I don't really see this taking much time either.
Okay, so then we can just move forward then and we'll be fine. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right, everybody understand where we're at and what's in consideration right now, just to make sure. I think it's about time that we start to get moving on this item. Anybody from council that hasn't spoken yet that wants to speak? Not seeing anybody. Anybody want to weigh in on this again, even if you already have? City Clerk, can we see if we have members of the public that'd like to comment before we move?
Mr. Mayor, it looks like Brett Glass.
Mr. Glass?
Honorable Mayor, members of council, thank you. I was going to comment before, I haven't had an opportunity until now. I am just amazed by this ordinance. Our city has parking problems which amount to crises in 2 areas, downtown and the area surrounding the university. And even in other areas, we see streets that are packed with cars because residents can't park in their apartment buildings' lots or in the driveways of shared homes. They're out in the streets. The claim that parking lots are sitting empty other than retail parking lots in the middle of the night is very simply just not true. This ordinance, you have to, I think it pays to look at where this ordinance comes from. It's the product of a lobbying group known as the cdlc, which consists of members of the Chamber of Commerce who are builders and developers. This group, which has been lobbying city staff extensively, does not represent the general public or the public interest at all. They want to build as cheaply as possible and maximize their revenues without any care for the mess that they might create later. They're pursuing this harmful agenda via multiple avenues. We first saw it in the proposed downtown design standards. It'll be back before you in 2 weeks. And now we're seeing it in this ordinance, which nobody saw coming. The boomerang doesn't cover council anymore. And hence, no one had a chance to comment on it in advance. Why is there such an effort to get it passed? There really can be only one answer, which is just greed. Other cities, especially university towns, have had experience with this, and we can learn from that experience when they've done the right thing. I've emailed to you the parking requirements adopted by the city of Palo Alto, California, where I lived when I was attending graduate school. They did it right, and you will notice that their parking requirements make a lot more sense than the ones in this ordinance. Now, the comments from staff on this item ignore the fact that this is Wyoming, not Boulder, not Fort Collins, not Denver. People want and need their cars. They're not going to pay to get autonomous vehicles, which for most people are about as likely to become available as flying cars. And we don't have sufficient population to support ubiquitous, convenient mass transit. There's already not adequate parking in our town. I've seen people literally fighting over parking spaces near campus, and the tenants of the building that my family owns in downtown are constantly experiencing problems with it. Staff claims that the neighborhoods around the university are single family, and that's simply not true. We have multiple students in that unit, sometimes sometimes more than one per bedroom, and each one has a car. Now, this ordinance doesn't just reduce parking requirements to ridiculously low levels. It also proposes to introduce absurd loopholes, such as allowing a developer to count a parking lot 1,000 feet away toward that absurdly low requirement. Just for references, our blocks here in Laramie are 200 feet on a side, which means that a parking lot completely out of the neighborhood 5 blocks away could be used as an excuse to skimp on parking. The ordinance even prohibits developers from providing parking a mere 10% beyond those absurdly low requirements, so a business or residential development can't compete by offering more or more convenient parking, and this is simply anti-competitive. All of this will simply set a bad precedent for the university, too. The university has long tried to skimp on parking, and if the city allows it, they'll see it as a green light to do it themselves, even more than they already do.
Mr. Glass, that's time for now. I'd ask you to provide further comment in a written format to us. Thank you very much.
Yes, I'm sorry. I will speak more later.
Any other comment from the public on that item?
Mr. Mayor, I see no other raised hands.
All right. Members of the council, further comment? Council member O'Doherty.
In section 1, the issue Mr. Glass raised about within 1,000 feet, my understanding is that's already in the code. So I don't think that's being added. Could staff clarify there, please? Thank you.
Mr. Cox.
Mayor and council, yes, that is already there.
Thank you for verifying that. Councilmember O'Doherty, anything else?
That's it. Thank you.
Mr. Teeny, I see you there. Did you want to add something?
Mayor, if I may, just kind of a general comment. I think one other item I've just heard through the comments of this evening is there might be specific items within the table that maybe members of council are not specifically comfortable with. What I would suggest is, especially if this moves forward, have those ready for the next meeting, because what I would say is that in total, there may be some things that maybe council isn't in agreement with, and that's okay. I think the general direction we're trying to go with this, even if some of these change, we think that that's a good thing for the community, both for housing related items and commercial related items. And so if there are items that are throughout there, I think that that's a good discussion for council to have. Maybe a few of those get readjusted, maybe back to the original number or some other number that you think is more acceptable. And I think having that prepared can help our discussion as we move forward, potentially at the next reading.
Thank you, Mr. Cheney. I think that's a reasonable and constructive request. City Clerk.
Mr. Mayor, I just wanted to know, it appeared as though Shayna Bowe had unmuted towards the end of that public comment period.
Let's go ahead and allow public comment.
Actually, it's Mike Cisneros, and I apologize. We're just on a shared. Anyhow, there's a lot of different things that go into place here. And so if you're going to look at it from two aspects, you might want to look at it from three, or include small businesses in the mom and pop businesses in with the residential. Because, you know, say for instance, like if you've got a restaurant that has 15 tables, maybe they need a lot more parking. But if you've got, you know, a barber shop that is in a commercial zone, but, you know, off of the downtown area, you know, they probably don't need that much parking. And there's a lot of clients who can't afford to move forward because of some of the restrictions that are out there. And so I would definitely make sure that you guys are including the small mom and pop businesses either in the same category with the residential, or do A, B, and C. That way you're covering the whole city and able to take care of all of the people in the community for their needs, because there are too many people that can't move forward with their projects due to restriction for parking costs.
Thank you, Mr. Cisneros.
Thank you.
City Clerk, just to check again, make sure we don't have folks waiting to make comment.
Mr. Mayor, that's all that I see.
All right. And then we'd go back to the council for any very last comments before we move to the roll call on this item. Going once. Twice. City Clerk, can we have a roll call vote?
Cumby.
Can you repeat the question?
So the main. Do you want me to repeat the main motion, Mr. Mayor?
No, that's all right. I think Councilmember Cumby, is your inquiry what your vote will be approving at this point? This will be to approve this item on first reading. We've discussed at some length options that the council can consider on second reading that get into the matter of dividing up the issue and some of the things that we talked about previously. This will be to approve it on second reading to move it to our agenda the next time. Approve it on first reading and move to our agenda for second reading the next time.
Thank you. Yes.
Gabriel.
Yes.
O'Doherty.
No.
Somerville.
Yes.
Schuster.
No.
Stalder.
No.
Harrington.
Yes.
Pierce.
Yes.
Weaver.
Yes.
That's 6 yeses and 3 noes, Your Honor.
All right, that motion carries, and there will be further opportunity for discussion on this item. There will be a public hearing on this item, and we will gather further public comment and information and feedback from the community about this at that time. I believe there probably will be some forthcoming. Moving on to the next item, item number 16. Who did we have signed up for introduction of item number 16? I believe it is Councilmember Cumby.
The title is Original Ordinance Number 2018, amending Title 1514-130, Wireless Communication Towers of Laramie Municipal Code of the City of Laramie. I move to approve Original Ordinance Number 2018 as recommended by the Planning Commission on first reading in accordance with findings of fact and conclusions of law.
Do I have a
Second.
Seconded by Vice Mayor Pierce. Mr. Teeny.
Mayor and council, good evening. The item before you is an ordinance for regulations related to wireless communication towers, small cell wireless towers specifically for the city of Laramie. What I would like to do is I'm going to provide just a general overview of what you're going to see within this ordinance. And then what I have is I will then have the city clerk play a presentation that was recorded by our consultant who we hired to prepare the ordinance that's before you. And then what I'll do is I'll probably have some concluding comments, and then following that, open for questions related to the ordinance. And so this ordinance is related to small cell facilities found within our code. Currently, we have a whole section on wireless communication towers. Those are cell phone towers, things like that, cell phone towers that you see standalone on buildings, attached to light poles, things like that. Small cell technology, what we're seeing is really emerging as the source for 5G technology, which is what's going to power high data rates to allow for cell phones to play videos and do all the things that we like to do on our phones. But with that technology, what we're seeing is more of these towers or these antennas are needed. And because more of these antennas are needed, we're often finding within communities that these antennas are being located in a couple different places. One, within public rights of way. So think on telephone poles, on light poles, on signposts, things that allow it to be located within the right of way. Also, we're seeing them on buildings, buildings that are near rights of way or spaces that need to provide coverage. So what really prompted this ordinance is as this technology is becoming more common, and as a community we desire and we want to have this technology available. We wanted to make sure that when this technology does come to the community, that we're taking care of some of the things that could cause problems, aesthetic issues, impacts to neighborhoods, businesses, as well as impacts to city rights of way and how our rights of way are used for all the other things that we use rights of way for parking, for driving, for utilities, for other infrastructure, for other franchise utilities like gas and electricity and cable. And so during over the past few years, the federal government, the FCC, has adopted many regulations regarding what can and can't be done. And with that being the case, the city felt that it was important to hire a consultant. We did hire a consultant, which is River Oaks Communication Corporation. It's Bob Duchin. And he has been the one that has tailored the ordinance that you see here for Laramie. To address the concerns the staff and that we had from industry providers within this area. And so Bob and his company River Oaks, I think we've had a little bit of discussion with him. He was on a council meeting earlier in the year when an amendment was made to his original contract. But he's done this wireless code work for other communities such as Cheyenne, Cody, Pinedale, and Casper. He's also provided templates for communities in Nebraska and New Mexico. He also was hired by WAM with the state of Wyoming to produce some draft ordinances for them to be used for other communities and smaller communities within the state to address this issue. So Bob and River Oaks Communication, he will be on our second reading and will be available for any questions that you might have. specifically, especially those technical questions. He's a wealth of knowledge and a great source of information. When we start to really look at this ordinance, you've got kind of two real main sections of this. In the first portion of the ordinance, which is sections 1 through 18, we have some basic editorial items that have changed. We have some terminology that's changing because of the changing technology and the terminology that was used when we drafted this code. The portion that exists today that is different than now. And then also we've made some other changes. One of the specific changes I'll point out is we increased tower size from 75 to 100%. That's the fall distance for a tower. And then we also made a few other changes that you'll see in that sections 1 through 18. The bulk of the changes that you're going to see are really found in section 19, which is attachment A. It's the new section that's been added that really addresses the specifics related to small cell wireless facilities. What we're doing is we're adopting standards for access and installation within our rights of way, ensuring that they're not impacting things like existing utilities or future needs, such as traffic lights. We have sections that provide things such as exemptions, because there are things that we cannot regulate and that we shouldn't regulate. We address where and what zoning districts those facilities are allowed. Noise requirements, that these things can produce noise, humming, and different other sounds. Design requirements such as the color, lighting, landscaping, and site development. Also, public notice requirements if there are new poles being installed, and how to apply for variances if these companies need variances from the standards that we have. We prohibit installation of signage on these poles so that people can't produce and make these pseudo advertisements. We also, we're instituting standards for building mounted facilities, height requirements, requirements for equipment that are associated with these antennas, safety requirements such as traffic control, locations for locates, street closure permits, and right-of-way obstruction permits. We also are requiring how we inspect and what type of technical review might be needed if we need to have this looked at by a third party. I'll say this ordinance is fairly technical. You'll see there's a lot of references to other regulations. Because of the way in which this is set up at the federal level, we can and can't do certain things. And that was really why we ended up having to hire a consultant. It just simply was not something that myself or our staff had the knowledge to produce on our own. When this item was before Planning Commission, there was quite a lot of discussion just regarding the ordinance itself. We did have one of the main public comments we had was regarding a model ordinance that was produced. The model ordinance that you'll see, and it's included in your packets of materials, is a model ordinance that's been drafted that gives communities maybe a starting point. Our Planning Commission asked us to take a look at that in more detail. At the following meeting, when we came back before Planning Commission, we provided them the information regarding, one, we had looked at that model ordinance, and that was something that we did review. Number two, the model ordinance that was produced was not ready for a community to adopt. It required a consultant, such as Mr. Duchin and River Oaks Communication, as well as input from the community to develop. There are multiple sections within that model ordinance that aren't complete, and they would not be adoptable even in the standard that it was. And so what you'll see is the ordinance before you actually has lots of sections that are very similar to that model ordinance. And so I point that out as it's something that's been brought up in public comments in the past, and is something that we have addressed. Another item I'd like to bring up is just regarding the fact that we have worked with multiple different groups of people that this ordinance may pertain to. One, local providers. We've also had many national providers provide us comment and work with us to get the ordinance to the state it is in before you. That includes both Verizon, AT&T, and Visionary, all provided comments that were eventually incorporated into this. And so with that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to now ask the clerk to play the presentation that was done for our Planning Commission by River Oaks Communication. He's going to provide you a large overview of the ordinance and what's before you. And then I'll kind of have some concluding items and we'll go from there.
All right.
proactive, because what's going to happen is the providers are going to come, site acquisition companies are going to come. They're going to want to put in what they're calling small wireless facilities. I'd say at the outset, small wireless facilities is a bit of a mistake. I'll tell you why. The FCC in their 2018 order said that small wireless facility can be up to a 50-foot pole. It can go 10% higher if there's a taller pole in the area. You're going to have antennas at the top of the pole that are 3 cubic feet in volume. At the base of the pole, you could have up to 28 cubic feet of equipment, which is quite large. So it's very important that you think about, how are we going to handle this influx of applications? How are we going to handle the new pole requests we're going to get? And what are we going to do when the providers want to put these in residential neighborhoods? The key word here is densification. Unlike traditional macro cell towers, which are in more rural areas or outside of the city and 150 feet tall, you're going to have these facilities anywhere from 300 to 1,200 feet apart. And that's per what industry has said on a recent call I was on, not with AT&T, with Laramie, with someone else. So you can anticipate you're going to see a large number of these. So the smart thing is, let's get some regs on the books. Let's be proactive. Let's welcome the technology. Let's work with the providers, which is exactly what we've done, to get their comments, pro or negative, in terms of these regs. And let's see what we can come up with so that the providers can go about deploying their facilities. At the same time, the Laramie community can continue with its distinct character in anticipation of the fact that you're going to get a lot of these at some point in time. The next slide, please. Very briefly, I'm based in the Denver area. We've assisted communities throughout Wyoming on small cell regs, everyone from Cheyenne to Pinedale to Cody to Casper are some of them. We have worked very closely with the Wyoming Association of Municipalities. I'm an attorney by background. We've testified on the association's behalf in front of the legislative committee. The last legislative session on some matters, we've drafted template regs for communities in other states, such as Nebraska and New Mexico, working with their municipal leagues. And over 3 decades and various projects, from cable TV to wireless to broadband to small wireless facilities, as the case may be, our work's covered 38 states. So we've got a pretty good idea of best practices nationwide. I will tell you that a ways back, the National League of Cities and its members were very involved in this process. They tried to work with industry. That was reached with varying degrees of success or not success. The model ordinances that came out of there were not favorable to local governments. And I will share with you, the FCC is, at this moment, is very untoward. It's very unfriendly towards local governments. You can see that in the FCC order in 2018. You can see that in the 621 order, which deals with cable franchise fee offsets. So I'm here to tell you, like it or not, we've got an FCC that just really
is more pro-industry than pro-municipality. And that's important when we talk about what you can do and what you cannot do. The main thing is you still can do things because this is your right of way. Next slide, please. So the magnitude of this is unbelievable. The FCC in its order projected 800,000 small cells in the next decade. That's not a typo. That's the FCC. You're going to see explosive growth in capacity. And the reason is because the networks, the providers' networks are being overwhelmed by the usage of iPads and iPhones and laptops and desktops. They need more capacity. That's why you're going to see the influx of these small cells. On the aesthetic side, the FCC had 4 criteria in their 2018 order. The U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals for the Ninth Circuit remanded and threw out 2 of those criteria. The criteria with which we are left are that the aesthetic requirements you come up with have to be reasonable and they have to be published in advance. We talked about the size of the small cells, and as Derek has said, we've talked about you want to be ready as the 5G technology continues to evolve. I'm sure you've all seen the commercials. All the providers are boasting about their 5G service. What I'm here to tell you is there's a difference in 5G services. One of the best descriptions I heard was from a provider. I was given a presentation pre-pandemic over in the Boise area, and one of the reps from Verizon said, 4G is like a highway with a couple lanes. 5G is a highway with more lanes. The more lanes you've got, the more data throughput you've got, the more capacity. So that's why this all needs to be done. There's an exponential desire on the part of consumers to have the fastest, the most reliable, the quickest coverage you can get. Next slide, please. The procedural steps, very briefly. We sent the draft out to the providers. We got their comments. We've got local providers involved. We've got national providers involved. We've covered various items in the proposed regs, from color to lighting to we've encouraged stealth design to keep the look of your community. We have followed federal guidelines. We're very much aware of the federal laws. This started in 2012 with what's an eligible facilities request. That's one of the 5 shot clocks to intervening actions of the FCC, to the 2018 order, to the June 10 declaratory ruling of the FCC where they changed one of the processes in the 5 shot clocks, to the U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals on the U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals for the Ninth Circuit pretty much upheld that 2018 order. So we're very in sync with what's going on at the federal level. Frankly, you all are very lucky you don't have state small cell legislation. It's in about 20 different states. It's not favorable to cities. Some of it is even more restrictive than the federal guidelines. What we want to do is we want to encourage broadband availability. That's the big picture here. Next slide, please. So what are the goals of the regs? Some of them are to protect your visual quality while facilitating the balanced rollout of these facilities. And we want to preserve the aesthetic character of your community to the extent we can under federal law. Next up, please. We've talked about the various height requirements, the size requirements. Let me just touch very briefly on the last bullet point. I've seen some very angry letters from constituents in other cities who we represent around the country. And those people are very concerned about RF emissions. What you need to know is that the FCC's got exclusive jurisdiction over RF radiation limits. Their standards are old, they're not perfect, but that's what we've got. And the FCC has basically said in the US code, cities can't make decisions based on RF emission standards if the providers are operating within the FCC guidelines. Some people are very concerned about the health and safety of the 5G equipment because you're going to have so much of this equipment in confined areas. I'm not here to tell you one way or the other. All I can tell you is that's an FCC call, not a call for local governments. Next up. So who is excluded out from these regs? You know, we don't want these regs to ensnare providers. We don't want them to be a surprise to providers. We don't want them to hamstring providers. So what we've done purposely in these regs, we've exempted out everyone from ham radio operators to satellite dish operators for TV, for temporary facilities that are needed for emergency basis, for companies that deploy antennas on people's homes, local ISPs, to city facilities, to fixed wireless broadband. These regs are predominantly for the large cell phone carriers. That's the way to look at this. Next up, and data providers, I should say, large data providers, the big multi-million, multi-billion dollar companies. Next up, what we've done, because we want this technology, is to provide for an expedited review process. If someone comes in from a small facilities request, these are going to be permitted in all zones by administrative review unless their installation requires a pole or a structure that exceeds the height of their affected zoning district. So what are we saying to these companies? We're saying we want you in Laramie, but if you're going to put in something that's larger than the FCC parameters, then you're going to need to go get a conditional use permit, because practically speaking, those are going to stick out. They're going to be taller than 50 feet or 10% higher. Or if they're allowed to go 10% above 50 feet, you don't want something that's 70 feet in a residential neighborhood. Next slide, please. And so what are some of the safeguards that are built into these regs? Design, color, lighting. We're trying to minimize the adverse visual effects in the residential neighborhoods in the downtown areas. And yet we've provided for site design flexibility. None of us sitting here can predict what provider's design is going to look like in all instances. That varies. AT&T's design may be different than Verizon's or T-Mobile's or Extenet's or Crown Castle's. So we built in flexibility so the city can work with these providers. And what I would encourage you all to do, depending on where you want to go with these regs, is have the providers come in and provide pictures of their designs for small wireless facilities. We did that out in Pierce County, Washington the other day. T-Mobile sent in their design. We're going to get the designs from Verizon and AT&T Wireless, so that the county in that instance and the city in your instance can see what these are going to look like in advance. And we're hoping that will allow the permit process to move right along. Next, please. Very quickly, here's some pictures of some wireless facilities. You see equipment cabinets in front of you to the right. That's a wireless facility that's stealthed into what's looking like canisters. Next picture, please. You can see the antennas on what I think is an electric transmission pole below the electric wires. Next up, please. Why is this important? We talked about they want to add capacity to their networks. Your public right-of-way is the prime candidate. And that's why the industry lobbied the FCC to make it easier for them to deploy in the right-of-ways. Rather than having to go to the banks and the schools and the city buildings everywhere, if they can put these small wireless facilities in the right-of-way, their deployment will be quicker. And that's why they've got the ability to stealth these facilities and make them blend in with the geographic areas in which they're going to go. This is not an all or nothing situation. They've got the ability to stealth these facilities. That's why I encourage you to work with them. Next, please. So what can you expect? Because these poles are typically only 50 feet, it's going to be unlikely they're going to co-locate because there's not enough space on these poles versus a large macro cell tower someplace else. So they're either going to put these on street lights or traffic signals, or they're going to want to put in their new poles. And so that's why you need to think about, okay, where's this going to go? What's it going to look like? And how are we going to handle the rollout of 5G? Batching is something that means that they can include more than one small wireless site in an application. You'll see in the subsequent slides, they can put 5 sites in one application. And you can only charge them $100 per site and $100 for each subsequent site in that application. That's what batching is. Rather than come on in with a one-off situation, they might come at you with, or come to you with multiple requests. Next up, please. This is not very pretty. The providers can do a lot better. And I want to show you some good examples, some positive examples of what can be done. At the end of the presentation, Derek, please, the next slide. These are the safe harbors under the FCC regs from the 2018 order. And the Ninth Circuit upheld these numbers. We talked about them briefly. There's the application fee I was talking about. It's $1,000 for a new pole. It's $270 on a recurring annual basis for each right-of-way site of a small wireless facility in the right-of-way. You can go above these numbers if you do a cost study. If you can show your actual documented costs are more than these figures, you've got the right to do a cost study. We did one for Casper, and the numbers were significantly higher. But that's up to you if you want to do that. If you're happy with the 270 or a number less than that, that's up to you. Some cities care more about having the technology than the money. That's a policy call. Next slide, please. More pictures of boxes. Now these, and you can see the antennas on the power pole, on the electric distribution poles or transmission poles. And the next slide, please, Derek. Look at the top of this street light, okay? And then if you look at the very top and look at the bottom, go to the next slide, please. And this is a good news thing. Look what a great job the industry did there. You can hardly tell there's an antenna on the top and some equipment at the base of the pole. The next slide, please. Same thing, look at the top of the street light. And if you go to the next slide, you'll see the antenna and the equipment at the base. But that is really well done. I mean, who's going to notice that when they're driving around the city? Okay, so my point is, again, work with the providers to come up with workable designs. A couple more slides, please, Derek. It's kind of hard to see, but you'll see another street light. And then you go to the next slide and look at the top and the bottom again. So this is a good news scenario. The providers are very proficient at designing these small wireless facilities. You'll need to see where they're willing to work with you on a stealth basis. We want them to try and minimize visual impact to the maximum extent possible, especially when they get in the residential neighborhoods. That's when these become pretty controversial. And that is the end of the presentation. So I hope that provides a good framework for you. I hope that shows you that we're working with the providers. We want to work with them, and we want you to get the technology. We could spend the next hour if you want me to talk about all the regs and all that, but that's not why we're here today. We like to take a practical approach to this. The technology's here. It's coming. So let's help make it a reality in Laramie. Questions?
Mayor, Council, so that was Bob Duchin, and like I mentioned before, he'll be available for our second reading for specific comments that you might have for him. I think when you look at these regulations, there's a lot in here, and they're specifically tailored for the community, but they're also specifically tailored to this technology. And I think the key thing, I think the key takeaway on this ordinance is that the technology will come to the community at some point. We don't know when it will be. We don't know who is going to bring it. Is it going to be AT&T or Verizon or some other company? But it will be here. 5G technology will be in the community. And we cannot say it can't be in the community either. The federal regulations say that it will be here. But what we can do is we can protect ourselves in terms of some of the things that I talked about, such as the visual aesthetics, the location, making sure it doesn't interfere with things like traffic signals. And so the ordinance that you have really is what that does. And so I think what I want to do is I'll leave it at that for the moment. I would be happy to take questions on the ordinance or just the general topic. And then also, I'll take down any comments that maybe I can't quite answer. I don't feel, like I can answer if it's a really technical question, and have that ready for our second reading and for our consultant as well. So,
Mr. Tini, is it accurate to communicate? I think the consultant featured in the video tonight will be present at the second reading for questions and commentary.
Mayor and council, yes.
All right. All right. Thank you, Mr. Tini. Councilor Gabriel, I say there.
You bet. Thank you, Mayor. I thought Bob brought up a very interesting point at the very end, Derek, and maybe I hope you can comment on this, talking about workable designs and limiting the visual impact. From what you know, are the companies, as far as you can see right now, willing to work with cities to limit some of the visual impact?
Mayor and council, so here's kind of what my experience has been up to this point. This has been a large learning curve for me as well. This is a pretty new topic for me to delve into. But with that, you know, most of the providers that we communicated with, their legal team sent us different comments and things like that that were incorporated into drafts before this even went to Planning Commission. I would say probably the most contact I had with any one group was with AT&T and their legal team. AT&T, I think we had 3 or 4 different meetings with them to go over this ordinance specifically. And you know, in those conversations, I think here's the reality. I don't think these companies are necessarily wanting to you know, harm the community, but also too, they are focused on providing the service. And if they can provide the service in a cheaper fashion, which may not be as aesthetically pleasing, they'll do that if they can. I mean, and I think that's kind of the reality of it. And I don't think it's being done necessarily with some malicious intent, but if they can attach it to an existing light pole that we have, or a traffic signal, or a signpost that happens to be in the right of way, and we don't have something that maybe prohibits it, they probably will. You know, there are some people though, if you ask them, they might, you know, make it look nicer, maybe cover some of the equipment, but there's no guarantee in that.
So in your opinion, Derek, do you feel that this proposed ordinance takes into account what we're talking about, limiting the visual impact?
Mayor and council, yeah, I do. And I think that, you know, that's one component of this ordinance is some of those visual aesthetics, you know, improving quality of life type components. So I think that's what a portion of this ordinance does.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tini. Thank you, Mr. Councilmember Gabriel. Councilmember Schuster, and then I have Councilmember Stalder.
Is it okay if I make a comment?
Yes.
Okay. I have seen 3 really good jobs of hiding the cell tower. One's on top of fire station, I believe they call it number 2 on Reynolds Street. They built a little, I'm going to call it a topper on top of the building, so it looks like it has vents on it. That's actually housing the cell tower. And on university property right next to our cemetery, and you can see it on Harney, there's an artificial pine tree that's actually a cell tower. And then over in Cheyenne, since my daughter lives over there, she pointed one out on Cheyenne Frontier Grounds. It looks like there's an old-fashioned water tower that says Cheyenne Frontier Days on it. That's actually a hidden cell tower inside what looks like an old-style water tower. So yes, they are doing really hard to make these things aesthetically pleasing. And that's the 3 examples I know of in the region. So I understand what they're trying to do, and I'm happy for it.
All right. Councilmember Stalder, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm not sure my question is within the scope of this contract, so maybe that's my question is, are we addressing this? But with 5G, there's a lot of, you know, enhanced security threats, and I was wondering if anywhere in this contract there was anything about mitigating the security threats from 5G, like would these towers have to be CAA compliant, or is that like a completely different agreement with another provider?
Mr. Cheney, is that under the umbrella of things we might want to ask the consultant next week?
Mayor and council, can I get some clarification on the question? I mean, are you thinking about like security in terms of the service that's provided by 5G helping things like police and fire and those, or are you talking about the other side of it, which is making sure that if we have that technology, it's not impacted by like terrorism or something like that?
Yeah, exactly. So I just didn't know if that was under what River Oaks did, you know, mitigating that sort of cybersecurity threat that comes along with 5G, or if that's separate from what River Oaks is doing.
I would say that probably River Oaks may have some comments related to what those providers, so like we'll think, you know, your AT&T, your Verizon, or anyone else like that provides that service does to try to address that as an issue. But for River Oaks specifically, and this ordinance, what we're focused on is not necessarily that the technological threat, so like the cybersecurity piece of it, but really the physical installation and the, you know, mounting on poles and things like that.
Yeah, thank you for that. What I was getting at is, I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor. What I was getting at is, you know, are these smaller devices that look really cool, are they TAA compliant, just like the big ugly ones, would be my question. And I can ask that at second reading too.
Okay.
And I have one follow-up question, if that's all right, Mr. Mayor. So I was reading in here that River Oaks has produced a draft model ordinance for WHAM, which could be used by varying sized communities to put in basic regulatory control. So how is what they're doing for us $16,000 different than what they did for WHAM that we could use as sort of a basic model?
So, Mayor and Council, so the ordinance that the model ordinance that's produced is just a model. It's something that you can start out with. And really you've got two things as to why we hired a consultant. One, needed the technical expertise to make sure that we're following all the rules and the guidelines related to like FCC and things like that. Some of that is in the model ordinance, but not all of it. Also, too, tailoring it to our community, making sure that we're addressing things. So, for instance, in Laramie, we have things like right-of-way obstruction permits. We spent time working with our streets department, making sure that these things wouldn't impact our traffic signals and the technology that we're using to coordinate traffic signals and traffic movements within the community. And so there are things that you would, if you look at the WHAM, the work that was done for WHAM, there's things that are probably extremely similar to what we have, but not all of it. Same goes for the model ordinance that was produced at the national level. There's things that are very similar. If you look in the packet of materials I provided a comparison draft, kind of compared the two to show you there's a lot of very similar material, but all of that has to be specifically tailored to your community's regulations by state and by the city. And so for us to make sure that we got this done and that it would actually get done, also too is a timing thing. We don't have enough staff to work through something like this. And so hiring a consultant was something we felt was important for this. So.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Stalder. Councilor Harrington, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Tini, I see under the exempted section, antennas attached to buildings. Does that include, are we talking specifically about if somebody wanted to install one of these 5G towers or antennas on an existing building, that would be exempt? It's really only regulating the use of them on poles or in our right of way. Is that correct?
Mayor and Council, can you tell me what section that is just really quick so I can find it again? Just make sure I'm telling you the right thing.
Yeah, you bet. It's section 4, exempt facilities, and then it is, let me see here, item F. And so it's the exemption to antennas attached to existing structures.
Yeah, so what you have here is when you have these things mounted onto like a building, they're exempted. There's some specific rules and regulations as far as allowing them to go there. They're actually a pretty common location for this type of technology because often buildings are a little bit taller than whatever's surrounding them. And so you are attaching them to them. What's good about it is it does allow for quick installation. You'll see similar provisions related to our larger towers for being installed on building. We have different rules and regulations for those as well. So it's somewhat in line with that. But like I said, the exemption is really focused on allowing these antennas to be put there because the building's already there. There's no new infrastructure getting put in, so we don't have to put another pole up or anything like that. And so it's fairly minimally impactful.
And Mr. Mayor, if I could ask a follow-up on that.
Of course, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. You know, I see under that section as well, it mentions providing internet for the residents or tenants of the building specifically. Does that 5G for the community from that area? And if so, why? I guess is the question.
No, this is for your more smaller local provider that is providing local internet services for residents and things like that. It's really not what the intent of this ordinance is, so we just specified that in there being exempt so that it didn't regulate any of those individuals or companies that might do that.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Looking for other council members. Don't see any. City Clerk, do we have members of the public that are waiting to speak? I see we have one for sure.
Mr. Mayor, we have Brett Glass.
All right, Mr. Glass.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, as you know, as you probably know, I'm an electrical engineer. I have been a wireless internet provider for more than 30 years now. And I am also the part owner of a building which has wireless facilities on top of it. So I have a lot to say about this. And it's not, unfortunately, the rules are not fair, at least the way they've been set up. I would like to have the opportunity to give as long a presentation as the previous speaker, and I could, because there's an awful lot here and there's no way I can cover it. But in any case, a good start to understand why the problems with these regulations would be to look at the item in your packet, which was included, which has many of my comments on the draft of the ordinance. I talk about why many of the provisions of this are contrary to federal law, why many of them would harm our ability to get good quality broadband and good cellular service in Laramie, and why essentially they are bad for business, and there really is very little in here that in any way would be suitable. Now, as for who will bring, there was a comment from staff about who will bring 5G, as they call it, which is really a marketing term more than a radically new technology into town. I know, because again, I am part owner of a building which has the facilities on it from two of these providers, and both of them want to do it, but they're not going to do it if it's prohibitively expensive or terribly difficult to navigate these regulations. There's a lot to them. When I saw the first couple of drafts of this ordinance, the consultant completely did not know about or understand some FCC regulations that were key to all of this, and was prohibiting things where essentially if the city had gone ahead and adopted the ordinances as it was originally drafted, the city would probably have been immediately sued. Now there is slightly less of a chance because some of those provisions have been remedied, but there are still things in there which, especially requirements for requirements that the carrier pay to have the city research things which were already settled by the FCC in terms of regulation, where again we could get sued. I want to address one thing. Councilor Harrington talked about an exemption for attached antennas. That actually is a consideration that is a result of one of my earlier comments. The FCC says that in many cases, a citizen has a right, which the city can't deprive him or her of, to have antennas on their on their residence to receive certain services, or on a business, in fact, as well. And that can't be taken away by any ordinance. That wasn't in there originally. That exemption is for that purpose. But it's very tricky. It only covers certain services and not others. And the FCC modified it just last week, and this draft has not been modified to accommodate that. So anyway, I'm not sure how best to communicate with council on this. Again, I'm going to run out of time before I even begin to go through some of the details. But I would like to communicate with you. I wouldn't like to see egregious stuff done, but I wouldn't like to see us disadvantaged either. Thank you.
All right. I'd note quickly that there's a public hearing for this at the next reading. The presence of the consultant there who may be able to better answer questions in an area of expertise that is not necessarily one that the city keeps on hand full time all the time. So there will be another opportunity for some input. Other methods of communication for members of the public that want to reach us are well known: email, calls, things of that nature. For anybody that had questions similar to Mr. Glass's about how to have an extended interaction or provide more input, those are often good methods to do so. And we'll note again that there is a second reading and a public hearing on this item. Any other comments? Mr. Tini?
Mayor and council, if you don't mind, two quick items. As Mr. Glass noted, all of his comments were included within the packet, and you'll see those there. Staff and our consultant has looked at those and reviewed those, and we've made changes as we feel necessary. Those were presented to Planning Commission, which they approved and recommended to you, and we continue with that recommendation. Secondly, I wanted to point out one last item in your cover sheet. You'll see staff does recommend that there be an amendment made to the draft that's being presented to council. The version that you have that's being presented to you is the version recommended by Planning Commission. After that meeting, AT&T reached out to us regarding a couple sections within there that they felt would be difficult for us to address. And after we talked with them, we really felt that the two sections that they asked us to potentially modify actually really wouldn't be that impactful and wouldn't change how we actually apply this regulation. And so you'll see in there is a amendment that we do recommend based upon the mayor's discussion about maybe not making amendments during this. I would say if you would like to make the amendment, you could do that. I provided a motion there that would modify that for you, or you could always wait until second reading. We could just leave that for another day and discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Tini. A note on that policy. You may recall at a fairly recent meeting of the City Council, we discussed that procedure. I don't believe it's written down anywhere, but that to follow a somewhat logical legislative pattern is to have a first reading to introduce items and the first part of discussion, time for consideration, and then a second reading, typically to work amendments. It's not written in stone. I think it's a good idea. And I'm generally going to be in favor of it unless, we universally decide to reject that in favor of having amendments at all readings. That's why I point that out. But anyway, I appreciate that, Mr. Tini, and I see Councilor Doherty eagerly waiting for me to recognize her to speak. Go ahead, Councilmember.
I have for one thing, I want to say that Mr. Glass, you did convey your information very well by annotating the whole ordinance. So I think that you've conveyed, and we know we can call you. But I have a question, a dumb question. I thought a shot clock had to do with basketball, and I have no idea what it means in terms of the FCC. So could somebody tell me what the heck that's about?
Mayor.
Mr. Keeney, yes, by all means.
Yeah. So just as in basketball, if we will continue with the analogy, we have a certain amount of time to process applications and to complete our reviews and to allow for permitting of the antennas. So does the FCC have a shot clock. And so that's really what it's talking about. It's a time frame, and they call it a shot clock. And there are federal regulations that we have to follow no matter what to make sure that we get these things reviewed in a certain amount of time. And our consultants provided us essentially an internal document that we can use kind of as guideline to make sure we're following these things as we get in applications in the future. And that's if they don't change, which they may.
Thank you.
Was that everything for you, Councilmember O'Doherty? All right.
Yes.
Anybody else? Councilor Harrington, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Taney, Mr. Glass mentioned the FCC modified its regulations a week ago. Does our ordinance reflect those? And if not, do we have a plan to reconcile?
Mayor and Council, we are aware of those changes that the FCC made a week ago, and the ordinance that you have before you complies with those regulations.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
All right. Anybody else? Other council members for comments or questions right now? Okay, I think in the interest of time, we better get to a roll call vote.
Are we ready, Mr. Mayor?
Please.
Okay. Cumby,
Yes.
Gabriel,
Yes.
Schuster,
Yes.
Somerville,
Yes.
Harrington,
Yes.
O'Doherty,
Yes.
Stalder,
No.
Pierce,
Yes.
Weaver.
Yes.
That's 8 yeses and 1 no, Mr. Mayor.
All right, and that motion carries. Another reminder that there will be a second reading, public hearing, and availability of the consultant, which I am looking forward to for more questions and answers. Let's move on to the next item, item number 17.
Thank you, Mayor.
Mr. Gabriel, thank you.
The title is Original Ordinance Number 2017, creating Section 15.24.15 of the Laramie Municipal Code regarding general contracting licenses. I move that Laramie City Council approve Original Ordinance Number 2017, creating Section 15.24.015 of the Laramie Municipal Code, establishing general contractor licensing within the city of Laramie on second reading.
Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilmember Cumby.
Honorable Mayor, City Council, Todd Feaser, Assistant City Manager. I've got Clarice Hoff here with me, and I'm going to turn the reins over to Clarice for a little bit more presentation here just shortly. But just want to let you know that since we were postponed and we had the work session, we have met with our group that's helped us devise this ordinance. We've worked through some different things. We've developed some responses to some of the issues that were brought up in the work session, and give Clarice a chance to bring those up, present those to you, and then we can work through this ordinance, hopefully get through second reading. Without any further ado, here's Clarice Hoff.
Thank you, Honorable Mayor and Council. I just wanted to do a quick recap, and then I will address the concerns that was brought forward during the work session that was emailed to me. The general contracting ordinance is just that, licensing general contractors with a qualified supervisor of record. The intent and purpose of the licensing of general contractors is to provide a fair and consistent licensing practice, elevating the standards while providing the community the ability to identify licensed contractors with the City of Laramie while maintaining the health and safety aspects for the community. The goal is to develop an effective, efficient, fair general contracting practices while providing the necessary basic requirements without being overly burdensome to the general contractor with the process. The contracting license process for both general contracting license and qualified supervisors of record mirrors the established licensing practices for the trade contractors and masters of records for those trade contractors with the City of Laramie. Through general contracting licenses, the business would provide certificate of liability insurance and State of Wyoming Workers' Compensation Certificate of Good Standing. Qualified supervisors of record provides the years of on-hand experience within the construction industry, bringing the practical knowledge, understanding, and skills needed. The successful pass in the class level being applied for shows their understanding of the codes and the ability to apply. The concerns that were brought forward through the work session, some of them I combined because they were very similar, and we will address those. Who provides the verification of experience? This pertains to the qualified super of record, or we have the qualification of experience or the verification of experience that is required by all that are being licensed with the City of Laramie. The trade contractors provide this now for their employees, journeymen and masters. Anyone, someone other than the applicant that knows the individual and that is willing to vouch for the applicant's ability and the years of experience. Their signature would need to be notarized. This can be a current or former employer, another contractor, an insurance agent, banker, a place where the individual has done business, someone other than the applicant. The second one was responses that hurts anyone starting out. It's a barrier to entry. General contracting licensing isn't the entry level. It is, if you're at an entry level, you need to be working underneath a general contractor. The general contracting licensing in place requires basic knowledge, experience for the general contracting that is needed for that. In speaking with the local insurance agents, they've actually relayed to me that there are times that they will not insure inexperienced contractors, that they will take a pass on it because of the liability. By not having general contracting and license, by not having general contracting licensing, that this allows the door to be opened for uninsured contractors to perform work at the customer's risk. Training program and development of an apprentice program. That's on the job experience. That's working for a licensed general contractor, and if the contractor is licensed, it should be a benefit to those individuals because they're working for someone that has met the requirements. They're working with someone that has shown the years of experience and has had the ability and the knowledge to pass the ICC test. And that should be a benefit to those that are working underneath a seasoned contractor. Individuals that are interested in the construction trade would seek employment with general contractors. By working for a general contractor, they would gain the years of experience on the job training, developing their skills, knowledge, and understanding, and providing them with a solid foundation of the construction industry. Not only just the building, but also the business portion of it. And the fourth concern was years of experience is too high. Obtaining a general contractor license is not a giveaway. It is a license to build, construct, and manage a building construction project, managing all aspects of the project, having a working knowledge of building as well as the building codes. This comes from years of working in the construction trade, working with seasoned contractors, developing the skills, knowledge, the competency, and understanding of all the aspects of the construction industry. The years of experience is not too high for the class level. Class A is for all types of structures. Class B is for light commercial and residential. Class R is for residential, and Class C is miscellaneous. Masters in plumbing and mechanical, they also have years of experience. They have to have 7 years in order to be a master of their trade. The masters, to become a master, you would work 4 years as a journeyman, 4 years as an apprentice before you can move up to a journeyman, and another 3 years as a journeyman to move up for that 7 years to be a master of that trade and get your ICC certification for those levels. The qualified supervisor of record for Class A, we have at a 7-year level of experience, along with the ICC test with a successful pass out of Class A. Class B and Class R, we have set at 5 years with a successful pass with the ICC equivalent test, and a Class C is set at 3 years. So I don't believe that the years of experience for someone seeking a general contracting license is set too high. The proposed years of experience are in line with the trade contractors that are licensed with the City of Laramie, as well as other jurisdictions that license general contractors. So the qualified super at a Class A level corresponds with a qualified master of record of 7 years with a plumbing master or mechanical master. The requirements for a qualified supervisor are the same as the trade contractors as far as what would be required in applying. There's certification of qualification, verification of experience, and the ICC test that successfully passes at the class level that the contractor is applying for. The education component was a concern. If someone had a degree from the university or another degree, that should count toward the practical experience that someone would gain from the on the job by working through years of experience. The degree doesn't necessarily correlate over to the actual practical experience that is needed through years of working in the construction industry, developing the on-hand skills, knowledge of the building a structure, and coordinating the projects, materials, subcontractors, and required inspections. One of the trade contractors has, one of our trade contractors that we currently have licensed, he has 2 licenses with the city. He actually has an engineering degree, but in order for him to have his license with the City of Laramie, he had to put in his 7 years of practical experience and pass the ICC test in his trade The total work experience and successful certification is the 7 years. The obtained his degree did not count toward the years of experience or certification. The difference between, there was a question regarding the difference between the general contractor Class A and Class B license. Class A can obtain a permit for all construction, alterations, repairs, or demolition of any type on any size structure, commercial and or residential. The Class B limits the scope of work that a permit can be obtained for the commercial project. Class B has two specific components. One dealing with residential. Permits can be obtained for residential construction of 1, 2, 3, or 4 unit residential buildings, not exceeding 3 stories, including accessory structures. Second component is light commercial, non-structural tenant finishes on existing structures and the construction of 1-story commercial buildings not exceeding 10,000 square feet. There was a concern or a request to consider provisional licensing. The provisional licensing is not practical. Either the general contractor has met the City of Laramie's requirements to be licensed within the City of Laramie, or they have not. There would be no reason to lessen the requirements. We are at a basic requirement that's being proposed now. A provision license would do nothing to guarantee the qualifications, especially non-residential contractors. The point of proposing the general contracting license is to bring a consistent, effective, efficient, and fair general contracting license process. There was a concern with multilingual. In the years that I have gotten to have the privilege of working with the general contractors and trade contractors, I have not run into that as a concern. I have a few that we assist in working through the contractor license, or they will bring someone in to help translate. That being said, we can have our applications in Spanish and obtain a translator when needed. But like I said, I have not ran into that as a problem or issue in the past. There was a consideration regarding the grammar of some of the wording. The verbiage used is consistent verbiage that is used with other jurisdictions in the contracting licensing, and Ordinance 2017 was reviewed by the city attorney. General contractors that work in the construction industry on a part-time basis, they would still need to be held to these same standards and requirements. Several trade contractors that hold licenses with the City of Laramie that are part-time, they adhere to the same licensing and testing requirements as a full-time trade contractor does. So I do feel that our overall general contracting license mirrors what we have in place with our trade contractors. It's fair and it's consistent. And then general contracting license was brought forth by general contractors that work in the City of Laramie, as well as the need that was presented by calls that we received on work that has been done by unqualified contractors. They brought forward the request to license general contractors to bring legitimacy to the construction trade. It was not brought forth to hinder anyone from becoming a general contractor, but to ensure the general contractors working in the city limits of Laramie have a thorough understanding, knowledge, and skill set of the building industry and of the codes, demonstrated by good business practices of liability insurance, workers' compensation, a qualified supervisor of record with the required years of experience showing the practical knowledge and skill set and the successful pass of an ICC certification in the level they're applying for.
Honorable Mayor, one thing to point out is that in your packet, we did propose an amendment to the definition of general contractor. And if you see that, we did propose that it means any person or entity who or compensation contracts or represents to be in charge of, lead, or manage any construction project by managing, directing, performing, or employing individuals, including by contracting with, and so on and so on. And we'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
All right, one thing at a time. We'll go questions in general, and then we'll, if we get there, we'll talk about the scripted amendment. We are on track right now for this item. I will note that it is 9:34. We are all right to continue along with this item, but just to let you all know, you're probably all staring at the clocks, so you don't need a reminder. Councillor Harrington, I saw that you were seeking recognition.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think just maybe one very quick comment and then my question. I think it would be valuable to offer this in Spanish. I think we may have not realized or encountered this. Certainly, Clarice, you know better than I. But I think maybe we have not encountered this because it's known that it's not an option. And I think as an equal opportunity organization, I think it's important and easy for us to offer that. So I think that would be valuable. And then for my question, I'm curious how this would affect, noting that the last statistic I heard was 52% of our rental or our housing in Laramie is rentals. We have a considerable market of people who make a living working on rentals, repairing rentals. How does this affect those people? Where do they fall into this licensing so that they are able to continue, but we can ensure that the work they're doing is quality and safe? Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Honorable Mayor, council members, the handymen that are working on rental properties that does not need permitted work, it would not affect. If they are needing permitted work, then they would need a Class R classification to perform the work. So it would affect them in that way that they would have to be licensed as a Class R. I received a call last week from a concerned citizen regarding rental property, seeing work going on there. And we are checking that situation out. And it is with a handyman that we have had experience in the past with. So one, I'm dealing right now with work that appears to need to be permitted, and working with him in the past in the same area. As far as affecting the rental properties, it would allow qualified contractors to be doing the work to eliminate some of the issues that we are finding with our rental properties.
Honorable Mayor, if I could add to that, I believe that the handyman has probably already got the experience necessary to do that. So in my mind, they would simply need to complete the licensing application and take the Class R test to be licensed as a residential contractor in Laramie to continue to conduct that work.
Correct.
That's great. That really clears up. I was concerned about the repercussions that may have, not on the property owner themselves, but on the tenants who live in those apartments, if they were unable to get the work done in some sort of timely fashion. So thank you, Mr. Mayor. That answer was sufficient.
All right. Who's next? I have Councilmember Stalder, then Councilmember Gabriel.
Along those lines of that comment you just made, Mr. Feeser, I wonder if you could speculate how many people fall into that category in Laramie, like just need to take the test. And kind of where I'm going with this is my biggest concern about this resolution or this ordinance. You know, and I think it promotes safety. That's awesome. There's so many good things about this ordinance. But there are people that would sort of drop out of the market of doing those repairs. And in some cases, that's probably good. And in some cases, it's probably a loss. And I just kind of wonder how many of those people are in the market. And when they drop out, like what would that do to sort of the price of getting a rental fix? And if that would encourage or discourage landlords from either following the ordinance or paying for the work. That was a really long question. I'm sorry.
Perfectly appropriate question. Mr. Feeser, do you want to follow up with it?
Oh, yes.
Honorable Mayor, I'll pass that question on to Ms. Hoff.
Certainly.
Honorable Mayor and council members, it's hard to say how many handymen would drop out because very few handymen actually come in and pull permits. Right now, we do not license general contractors, so unless we are catching them in the action of doing work without a permit, we don't always know the work that they're doing until we receive the call from renters being concerned of life and safety issues that work was not done appropriately. That was part of the reason why this general contracting license was brought forward by general contractors due to the fact that they come in after the fact of handymen doing the work and it not being to code, it not being in a life and safety result, and they're having to come back in, redo the work, costing the homeowner additional money, and then having to pursue a civil suit against those said handymen. This year or last week, I also received a call from a homeowner that hired someone outside of the city of Laramie. Contractor came in, which always kind of raises the question, if they couldn't get licensed in their jurisdiction, they're coming here to Laramie to do their work because the town that they came from does license. So they came over here. The individuals are out a considerable amount of money with a tore up basement that we went and did an on-site courtesy consult with them. So they will be putting out money to pursue in a civil manner. So bringing into general contracting license will help to alleviate some of those things, will help the stock of those that are coming in from outside our community that can't get licensed where they're from and performing the work here. That contractor that came in went so far as to hire an electrician that is not licensed with the city of Laramie, and no permits were pulled. So this was actually the homeowner calling upset because they didn't quite know what to do after that. So we're in the process of getting them back to square one, and but their resolve right now is a civil suit to that contractor.
Honorable Mayor, if I could add, you got to keep in mind, for you to Councilor Stalder, a lot of the work in rentals by handymans may not be permitted work. If it's painting, flooring, sheetrock repair, drywall repair, and cabinet insulation, countertops.
If it's like for like.
A lot of that's not really permitted work. Now, if they are doing electrical is supposed to be done by a licensed contractor within the city of Laramie. Mechanical and plumbing are the same way. So, and then if they get into where they're doing, moving a wall or installing an egress window, something that's permitted, then they would need to be licensed.
Thank you.
Okay. Councilor Gabriel.
Thank you, Mayor. Since we talked about this last fall, I think November was the last time that we decided to postpone. I've received nothing but favorable reaction to it. I was just wondering, since it's had a little time to sit, Clarice, from your standpoint, have you had, and you kind of answered it in your last response to Councilor Stalder, that have you had much response from other general contractors where we stand right now?
Actually, since the first of the year, I've had several general contractors inquiring about where to take the test, when this was going to be put in place, how to apply, and right now it's just on a hold. But it has been favorable comments from what I have received from the general contractors and from those that are inquiring about getting the test and applying and when it will start.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. I am looking around to see who's up. I have a question or two myself, but Councilor Schuster, you're going to go.
Thank you. I appreciate you letting me go first. I realize the mayor usually takes the end and puts it all in there. So I just heard him talk about a couple different things, that if it was a drywall repair, I have some people that have contacted me. They are retired. They have 2 rentals over in, I'll put it, West Laramie, and this is their livelihood. So when it comes to minor repairs, like somebody accidentally putting a hole in the drywall or painting or maybe a new countertop, these are things they don't have to be licensed to do. But if they did anything, and they're not going to because they're older than me, so I'm going to pick on them. They can't do anything structure like moving a wall. They can't do any plumbing, can't do any electrical. As long as they follow those guidelines, they're okay to do small little things to their own house that they have as a rental. That was one of my biggest concerns before, is can they work on their rentals that they are renting out to other people?
Honorable Mayor and council members, as we discussed and was presented at the work session, providing those exceptions, yes, they can work on their rentals as long as if they're replacing a window, you can replace the window if it's like for like. If you're just replacing the countertop, if you're replacing cabinets like for like, they most certainly can do those, and that is without a permit. When they start changing stuff structurally, that's when a permit would be required. Plans would need to be drawn. If you're painting, your flooring, those items those are not permitted items. The only thing that is covered in the general contracting license is permitted work.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I have a question. Oh, but I see Councilor O'Doherty has a question.
I have too many, if you want to go next.
All right. I think I'm going to go ahead. My question is, do we have a codified definition or table of like for like in
Honorable Mayor, council members, if you are replacing exactly what is there with something else exactly in the same place, a window, if you're replacing the window, you're not having to enlarge the opening or make it smaller, then you do not need a permit. Once you start enlarging and making the structure bigger or having to close it in to fit in a smaller window, then a permit would need to be required.
All right. So replacements covered, alterations not. Is that
correct?
A functional understanding?
Correct. Mm-hmm.
All right. Looking around, I know Councilor O'Doherty is up. Okay, Councilor O'Doherty.
So the amendment that Todd put on the cover sheet or wherever it is, I'm the one that proposed that, so I think I should propose the amendment to insert the word for compensation in the definition of general contractor as per the proposed amendment in our cover sheet.
Is that a motion?
I make a motion to amend the general contractor definition as described in the cover sheet by inserting the word for compensation after the word who.
All right, there's a motion, a second, I think from Councilor Gabriel.
Correct.
Okay. And I see Councilor Harrington already seeking recognition. So why don't you go ahead, and then if need be, we'll go back to Councilor Doherty for further discussion. Councilor Harrington.
I'm okay, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
All right, Councilor Doherty.
Oh, it was
yeah.
I think Todd already explained it, so I just wanted to bring it to the table.
All right, so it's been moved and seconded, and we were holding off. Anybody want to make comment or ask questions about this amendment? Okay, we're going to move it over to the city clerk to ask for public comment on this, on the amendment specifically.
Mr. Mayor, Brett Glass has his hand up. He had it raised before the amendment.
Right, so we'll give him an opportunity to see if he wants to speak to the amendment or just wait till we get to general comment.
Mr. Mayor, I'm on and for the amendment, and I can't start my video because for some reason it's not allowing me to. I don't know if that's been disabled. But please make sure that any amendment in this vein also allows me as a landlord to hire an electrician without having to hire a general contractor to hire the electrician. Because after all, as a landlord, I'm being compensated, but I shouldn't have to hire the superfluous middleman if I just need, say, an electrical outlet installed. And right now, the way it's worded, it looks like I do.
Okay, we'll take that as a germane comment. Any other members of the public? No, Nancy?
I see none other.
All right, thank you, City Clerk. Shouldn't be using first names. Parliamentary procedure. Please forgive me. All right, council members, who else wants to weigh in on this amendment? Councilor Stalder, please.
I just want to clarify back to the replacing like for like. If it's not permitted work, you can hire someone to do that. So you're compensating them, but it doesn't need to be a general contractor if it's like a cabinet. Is that correct?
That's off the amendment, but we'll go ahead and let the staff answer it because.
Well, no, I think it is on the amendment because it's for compensation. So let's say you're hiring a handyman to replace a cabinet or whatever, you're compensating them, but it's still not permitted work. That's still okay. I just wanted to make sure.
The chair feels corrected. Thank you. You are right, Councilor Stalder. That is correct. Does anybody want to talk about that from staff?
Honorable Mayor, council members, the handyman that is just replaced, you as a homeowner or a property owner, if you need to have a cabinet replaced or a window replaced that is for like, that would not require a permit, so they would not have to be licensed with the city of Laramie. Once it crosses over to permitted work, then the landlord or the property owner then they would need to hire a licensed contractor to perform the work. It's no different now that as a homeowner or a property owner, if you need to hire an electrician to do work, you can hire them directly.
Councilor Stalder, does that get to your question? All right. You were right. That was very much on topic. Okay. Anybody else on the amendment? Let's have a roll call vote on the amendment.
Gabriel.
Yes.
O'Doherty.
Yes.
Stalder.
Yes.
Somerville.
Yes.
Cumbie.
Yes.
Harrington.
Yes.
Schuster.
Yes.
Pierce.
Yes.
Weaver.
Yes.
That's 9 yeses and 0 noes, Mr. Mayor.
And the amendment carries. Back to the main motion. Councilor O'Doherty.
I have another amendment. This is just grammar. The word siding appears twice in the in the QSOR Class C. So I just think we should remove, it says roofing, siding, and then it goes on and then says siding again. So if we just remove the first incident of the word siding.
Okay.
Can you make that as a motion, Mr. Mayor?
I move we amend the QSOR Class C general contractors requirements to remove the first incident of the word siding in the list of things that they need experience in.
Second.
Second.
Seconded by Councilor Schuster, I believe. With second place on the second from Councilor Harrington. Staff, do you have input on this amendment?
Honorable Mayor, council members, no.
All right. Any council comment or discussion on this amendment?
Could we just approve that as
That's my intention.
by acclamation?
That's my intention. It's been moved and seconded without objection. I would offer that the council accept this amendment by unanimous consent.
Aye.
And motion carries. Moving on, back to the item. Councilor O'Doherty.
I'm sorry, this has just kept me up at night for a couple months now. We have a university here. We value education. The university has a bachelor's degree in construction management. In my opinion, and it includes hands-on work, in my opinion, a university degree, a four-year degree with hands-on experience, in addition, they have to sit for an American Institute of Contractors exam, should count towards some years of experience. So I would like to have an amendment for the next time around that expresses that could substitute to some degree. And also, and I'll try to word that so that the public can see my idea. But I have heard from contractors that aren't happy, people that have built good houses that had good inspection. Well, one in particular, and Pat, they're our neighbor. Councilor Gabriel. So what is that contractor to do if they've started this year and they built houses that people are really happy with, and now they have to go back and find somebody to work for 5 years in order to do what they just did well. So I have real heartburn with that, because I know that there are contractors who've been in the business for a long time who they could have me working on just roofing for 3 years or 5 years, and I only do roofing. That gives me 5 years experience in the trade. Whereas, for example, the construction management degree is more inclusive, talking about all different areas of construction so that students understand the different aspects. And to me, that is at least as valuable as hands-on experience doing one thing. So I will try again to try to get some wording for the next go around and present it so that it can be on the agenda so that people can evaluate it instead of trying to amend in the air. But I have real heartburn with the way the QSOR is written right now. Thanks.
Just a moment. The chair interprets the council member's statements for the next go around as the third reading. Point of information and perhaps order for the city clerk. City council must end this meeting at 10 o'clock. There are no other options to extend the meeting beyond the 10 o'clock hour. Is that correct, city clerk?
You're correct, Mayor. It does read, if the item introduced at the regular council meeting being discussed at 9:30 is not concluded by 10, the council shall adjourn the regular city council meeting to another date to conclude discussing the agenda item or the next regular council meeting.
So I'll hold my objections to next meeting, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Yeah, that's understood, Councilor Doherty. Yeah, we thought that's where you were going. So, folks, we are going to have to close this item, and I appreciate there are members of the public that are here that perhaps wanted to make comment. Unfortunately, we have that 10 o'clock deadline. Mr. Feaser, you wanted to address something, and then I'll go to the Vice Mayor.
Honorable Mayor, we'll save our comments for the next meeting.
I appreciate that. Vice Mayor Pierce?
Am I understanding that we need to vote on this tonight before 10 o'clock? And if the answer is yes, I would just assume we postpone so we can keep moving during second reading, if that's at all desirable by council.
The Vice Mayor, City Clerk.
Mr. Mayor, you do not have to vote tonight. You can absolutely postpone. And I was just going to make note that we have to leave time for public comment at the end.
Very good. Very good. On non-agenda items, though, I believe, or can we take public comment on this item, City Clerk?
It says City Council shall reserve time at the end of each regular meeting for public comments, regardless of the hour. It doesn't specifically state agenda or non-agenda.
The chair is going to interpret that as either way, comments on agenda or non-agenda items. And second reading will automatically extend to the next regular business meeting of the City Council, is my understanding of what we heard. So we are good to go. I'd like to take public comment on this item. I see Mr. Glass. Anyone else? Mr. Glass, you're up.
Mr. Mayor, one thing that's disturbed me during this conversation is that again and again, tradesmen or trade contractors have been conflated with general contractors, and during the discussion, and people have used you seem to be using them interchangeably. I always use when I'm dealing with my rentals, when I'm dealing with my own items. I always will use licensed contractors when there's licensing. Electricians, plumbers, things like that. But what I'm concerned about is that this ordinance may force me to hire a general contractor for a project. Especially in the case, where I might bring in more than one licensed contractor. Suppose I need a plumber and electrician or something like that. I really would like to avoid the imposition of unnecessary middlemen. Yes, there's a good reason to hire someone to manage a large project like the construction of an entire house. That's fine if you want to do it, but please make sure that this ordinance doesn't introduce an unnecessary middleman, and please make sure that it doesn't cause us to have to delay projects because the few licensed contractors in town are completely overwhelmed as a result of this ordinance, and I can't get someone from out of town, such as from Cheyenne or from someone who normally works in the county, to help me with the project. I really think that would be counterproductive. It would raise my costs. It would raise the cost of housing in general in Laramie. It would do a lot of bad things. So please, as you go forward with this, make sure that you don't inadvertently bring about any of those untoward circumstances or outcomes. Thank you very much.
All right, Mr. Glass, thank you. City Clerk, do we have anybody else in the queue?
I see no others, Mr. Mayor.
I'd like to talk, if I may. My video's not working for some reason.
Sure, but that sounds like Mr. Cisneros, so why don't you go ahead?
Yes, Honorable Mayor and Council, I'd just like to reiterate that, we are really for this ordinance for a lot of different reasons, but really I'd like to be an advocate for the public. We are a busy firm. We're not trying to generate work for ourselves. We have downsized in employment just because we prefer to have more professional staff than lots of staff members. So most companies are not looking at that particular aspect. But we do see lots of horrible things out there. And if you haven't been hit with the impact, then you don't quite realize it. We're on a job that we started about 3 weeks ago that we opened up the walls and we've got 17 outlets that were either covered with tape or drywall mudded over. And this is the domino effect that happens. And so now these new owners of this property have to deal with this. And so what happens a lot of times when you get a particular individual that acts as a contractor but doesn't work with professional licensed trade contractors, then they start doing all the work themselves, plumbing, electrical, HVAC, and it becomes a domino effect. This ordinance is not going to clear up everything that's going on out there. And we need to, as a community, continue to work on bettering what we as a community offer for the people of the community. The other thing that I want to address about the trades for the handyman is those jobs that require permitting that the handyman may have been doing or are currently doing still require permitting, whether there was a licensed contractor or not. So there's a fine line there, and everybody needs to try to make sure that we're staying on path for that. And, you know, a lot of stuff can be done by unlicensed contractors, by handymen who are able to perform those tasks. And there's a lot of good guys out there that are able to do that. But we need to be careful what that threshold is. And it's the public's responsibility in a sense as well to make sure that they're not hiring somebody that's doing the electrical, plumbing, HVAC. But I think it's very important that we make sure that we make this community a better place to live. And I appreciate your time. Thank you, folks, and I'll see you the next time.
Thank you, Mr. Cisneros, for those comments. And let me just say thanks to the members of the public for attending our meeting, hanging out throughout the duration of the meeting, and sticking around to make sure that they could have that input. We want that input. It's valuable to us. We don't always like to have these meetings go right up into that 10 o'clock time. It happens from time to time. So we appreciate your time this evening. Of course, extend that to the staff as well. Vice Mayor Pierce, it's over to you.
Are you wanting me to adjourn?
We have a particular adjournment procedure for executive session.
Thank you. Let's adjourn to executive session regarding litigation, Wyoming statute 16-4-405, lowercase a, Roman numeral 3.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Good night, everybody, and see you in a few, both of us.
Oh, can we have a
Mr.
second
Mayor?
on that, Mr. Mayor?
I would
I'll
second
second that.
that.
There's a couple of seconds, 3 or 4 seconds there. And all those in favor say aye.
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 Very good.
Thank you.